Hello everyone, welcome to Black Fog, your guide for drifting off. I know you listen to help you fall asleep, so like and subscribe to Black Fog before we start. Where are you from and what's your time? Now get comfortable and relax. Most of us have seen Groundhog Day. Bill Murray gets stuck repeating the same day over and over until he learns to be a better person. Charming enough to win over Andy McDowell's character. Great movie. What the movie doesn't really focus on, though, is just how long Murray is stuck in that loop. He learns French, piano, and ice sculpting. All of those would take decades to master. You've got to admire the dedication, but when you repeat the same day over and over, it's not like you have anything better to do. I wish I could remember the first few days. The early decades are just noise, static in the back of my skull. If there was a first day, it's gone now. But I'll do my best. I wake up at 7:15 a.m. That was my start time for the next 215 years. I'm supposed to be at a work event by 8, about half an hour away, so I'm already rushing. The quickest I've ever managed to wake up, get dressed, eat something, and get out the door was 4 minutes and 23 seconds. My drive takes exactly 19 minutes and 50 seconds if I avoid the speeding cameras and cops. On the first day, I wasn't so quick. Took me 15 minutes just to find clean pants. I arrived late, panicked, set up, and started playing. By work event, I was hired to play music at a local weekend market. My income was a bastard mix of Centerlink, odd jobs, and whatever strangers tossed in my guitar case. It's not like I was rolling in cash. I played shitty covers for 3 hours, just loud enough to compete with the blender from the smoothie stall across the path. Then I had lunch and a coffee break. I tried every single food stall in existence during the loops, and the only genuinely decent one was a little Mexican joint in the corner of the field. The coffee on site was garbage, but I found a good cafe about a 5-minute sprint away. By the 100th loop or so, I'd mastered the timing. I could grab my lunch and a decent long black and be back before my 15-minute break was over. After that, I played another 2 hours and packed up. Then the rest of the day was mine. I can't even remember how I spent it that first time. Maybe I went to the pub. Maybe I just went home and doom-scrolled. Either way, I'd eventually fall asleep. Then it reset. The first time it repeated, I thought it was déjà vu. The second time, I figured I just dreamed the previous day. By the 5th loop, I gave up on the market and just did whatever. There were no consequences. I drank. I stole cars. Broke into people's homes just to see what they were like inside. I joyrode down highways, ran red lights, did all the things you'd never do unless you were absolutely sure you'd get away with it. And for a while, it was the most fun I'd ever had. But fun decays. The thrill softens. Eventually, even anarchy becomes routine. So I pivoted. I decided I'd work through every movie I could ever have wanted to. I think I spent 50 years just watching movies, which is funny, considering I don't even remember half of them now. It's not like I could take notes. I tried doing the same with TV shows, music, and books. I binged, absorbed, forgot, and repeated. I tried games too, but that was a mistake. Can't save your progress when the day resets. Eventually, I started picking up skills. Painting, cooking, writing, anything I could do within a 24-hour time frame. I got really good at latte art for a while, even won a few barista competitions, unofficially, of course. I taught myself to draw photorealistic portraits, learned origami, memorized entire books, and then rewrote them with new endings. It wasn't about meaning. It was about motion, about numbing the clock, keeping my hands busy so my thoughts didn't crawl out of my ears. There's a lot I wish I could have done. Travel, see the world. But even if I could permanently leave the city, I only had about $400 to my name. I once tried walking until I collapsed from exhaustion. Slept on a stranger's lawn. Woke up in my bed. The weirdest part? You still get tired. Not physically, not even mentally in the usual sense, but spiritually, like your soul starts grinding its teeth. You decay in place. You forget who you are, not all at once, but by attrition, like your mind is being sanded down by repetition. I've lived so many lifetimes in the same 24 hours, and the one thing I learned above all else is this: time doesn't heal anything if it doesn't move forward. You stay stuck. You replay grief, shame, boredom, every unwanted emotion. Forever. You can't evolve. You can't forget. You just endure. I became an endless, powerless god. I tested the boundaries of the loop. I pulled all-nighters to see if staying awake would let the day progress. Didn't. As soon as 7:15 a.m. hit, I'd blink and wake up in bed. Still, I made the most of it. Sometimes I'd watch the sunrise just for the hell of it. I played with influence, tried saying the right combination of things to the right people. I made it as far as a meeting with the Secretary of the Prime Minister and Cabinet. That took, I don't know, thousands of loops? I delivered rehearsed speeches, memorized policy briefs, and rehearsed my charisma like it was a performance. But it never changed anything. At the end of the day, reset. Eventually, like Murray, I tried to kill myself. Repeatedly. Sometimes dramatically. Sometimes grotesquely. Maybe I'm just a worse person than he was, but I gave up on morality early on. I stepped off overpasses, drank bleach, set myself on fire in a church. I hung myself from a traffic light outside my old high school just to see if the janitor would notice. One time, I walked into a preschool and gutted myself in front of the kids. I remember blacking out with my intestines in my hands, blood pooling around my boots, hearing the shrieks of children still too young to process it. I woke up laughing. There was this one guy, a stranger, who was just being released from a mental health facility, traumatized from seeing someone die. I spent an entire week killing myself in front of him. Made it worse each time. He didn't remember, of course. No one ever did. So it's okay. None of it mattered. Nothing could kill me. Nothing could change the day. I became a museum of horror curated by my own boredom and withering sense of reality. I began seeing things. At first, it was subtle shadows where there should have been none. A flicker of movement at the corner of my eye that vanished the moment I looked directly. Hallways seemed to stretch longer than they should, doorways framing nothing but darkness. Sometimes, reflections in windows or mirrors didn't quite match my movements. A delayed blink, a smile that lingered too long. I became convinced that a man was watching me on one of the days. I could feel his gaze like a weight on my back, cold and unyielding. No matter where I went, he was just beyond reach, lurking behind crowds, slipping into shadows. He never spoke, but his presence was a constant, a slow poison that seeped into my skin. At night, when everything was silent and the world outside my window grew still, I'd lie awake, waiting to see him step through the door. But the door never opened. Sometimes, I swear the world itself warped around him. The sky darkened a shade too deep, the air thickened, and a low hum thrummed through the walls, like the loop was breathing, watching, waiting. When I slept, voices whispered secrets I couldn't understand. Secrets about time, identity, and consequence. And then, one day, it ended. Time moved forward. I don't know how. It's not like I did the right things in the right order or became a better person. I didn't have an epiphany or reach enlightenment. It just happened. I stared at those changing numbers on my phone like they were written in ancient script. I hadn't seen that time in centuries, and it hit me hard. I had no idea who I was anymore. I'd been so many versions of myself, tried on so many personalities, lived so many fragmented lifetimes that I forgot how to be someone. Or at least the person I was before all of this. I forgot my birthday. I forgot my friends' names. I had to relearn how to hold a conversation without knowing what the other person would say. How to plan. How to wait. How to live when things don't reset. The final lesson I was given by the loop is that you don't need eternity to become someone better. You just need time that hurts. Time that moves. I don't know who I am anymore. Maybe that's something I have to find out. For now, all I can do is wait and see what time decides to do next. I kill people for a living, and I've never been afraid of anything in my whole life until now. I know, but stick with me here. I'm not going to dive into all the personal shit leading up to this story. Not because I'm worried about boring you. In fact, I think you'd probably love to hear it. I'm an interesting guy. But frankly, it's not your business. All you need to know is that I've always liked to fight. But fighting doesn't make money on the street, and I was tired of being broke. So I graduated to killing, and I took to it like a fish to water. I do it clean, and I never touch anybody who I wasn't hired to touch. I have contacts. People go to my contacts for requests, not me. I'm no good with people anyway. And if I'm keen on the job, I take it. That's how this gig started. I don't quite know where to start a story like this, but it seems natural to begin like the day does. In the morning, I got a small place on top of a bistro called Virgo's. Sounds like a nice place from the name, I know, but it smells like hot dogs and cat piss. I don't mind. I'm only there to sleep, and when I'm sleeping, I can't smell at all. I rose early on a Sunday. I saw frost on the window, so I threw on a coat and walked quickly downstairs, dipping into Virgo's for a cup of coffee. I had a meeting. Early, Mike said. He ran the place. He always had something to say. I didn't think your coffin opened till 9. I laughed along with him. Some days you remember everybody else is getting by just like you, trying to make things pleasant, and other days you forget. That day I remembered. Mike burnt the coffee. My reward for being nice. Next time he made a joke, I'd sock him in his fucking face. When I arrived, my contact was waiting for me. We didn't like to meet at the same place more than once every few months. This time it was at the park. He was pushing his daughter on the swing set. As I got closer, I heard her ask her dad who I was. A friend, he said. Just a minute, honey. He walked over to the slide where I was waiting. She just sat there, sneakers dangling in the swing, too short to brush the wood chips, turning her head like an owl to watch us. As I spoke to her dad, I kept glancing over his shoulder at her to smile. She didn't smile back. I had a stupid urge to make faces. I didn't. You got one of your own? He asked as he lit a cigarette. You shouldn't ask things like that, I said plainly. All right, he said, reaching into his jacket pocket. Here. He handed me a sheet of paper with an address written on it. 5 o'clock. Get rid of this when you can. I nodded and waved goodbye to his daughter. She just kicked her feet and stared. My target was a woman. I don't often kill women, but I don't mind it. Every Sunday at 5 o'clock, this woman liked to go for a swim in an indoor pool, winter, spring, summer, and fall. Apparently she had some money. I didn't care. I take it as a personal point of pride if I know absolutely nothing more about my targets than the bare necessities. Not from any moral code. I've killed plenty of people I know, even friends, but just plain lack of interest. It came as a surprise that this pool was located in an industrial district. I guess looking back, it should have been my first clue that something was off, but I won't kick myself over it. I've been sent to every corner of the city for work, from posh country clubs to crack dens, and the ultimate truth remains that anyone, and I mean anyone, is one mistake away from being dead. I still had some time, so I went back to my place to make some special preparations. I took a broom from the stoop of Virgo's in one hand and my duffel bag in another, and I trotted down the alley until I reached the dumpster. I sprang open the lid and heard the scuttle of little rat paws as they scattered from the light. I swung the broom high from over my head and smashed down as hard as I could on a particularly fat-looking dude who had his head stuck in a takeout box. He was still as a doormat. I opened my duffel to grab plastic gloves and a plastic bag. I scooped the guy up, sealed him in, and threw him in my duffel along with my normal job materials. Leather gloves, a length of wire, and a .32 handgun. I didn't expect I would need the gun, but I always took it with. You might expect me to carry more, but it's not necessary. You wouldn't believe how easy it is to kill a person. I swiped a car, some ugly brown Kia, and drove downtown an hour early to scout the place out. From what my contact said, I expected it to be a dump, but when I parked between two old beater cars and saw the windowless storefront and the leaning letters in cracked blue paint that plainly read pool, I was sure I came to the wrong place. She was supposed to be driving a Mercedes, but I didn't see it anywhere yet. I wanted to go inside at least to see the door, but I didn't want to be seen snooping. My contact had explained the layout well enough. See, she had a private pool inside, some special arrangement. Down an employee hallway that was just behind the desk, locked with a special key, there was a room that was reserved just for her. My contact said that door was the only entrance and the only exit. No windows, not an ideal spot. Normally, I'd just kill her somewhere else, her driveway or a grocery store parking lot, somewhere I could get away right after. But before I walked away from my contact, he grabbed my shoulder. "One more thing," he had said. "Get her in the pool room before she touches the water. Understand? Don't let her in the water." Another clue that things were off, and one so obvious he basically beat me over the head with it. As I sat there waiting, I wondered why it mattered so much that she stayed dry. I thought maybe they didn't want to drain the pool from the blood. But if that was the case, there wasn't any reason it had to be in the room, and certainly not before she swam. What difference did it make? Maybe the client hated her so much he wanted to deprive her of her joy just before she entered, like some sort of Tantalus-style torment. Or maybe she was like a gremlin. Just add water for an instant monstrous surprise. It didn't matter why it needed to be done this way, it only mattered that I did it. After a little while, the hum of the heater started and the lack of anything to do started to get me a little. I startled myself awake. The Mercedes was just arriving. I almost missed her, god damn it. What a monumentally stupid mistake on my end. I should have got a second coffee from Virgo's, burnt or not. I was acting nervous, how I used to back when I was green. Thinking back on it, maybe part of me knew how weird this job was. I watched her swing open the car door. She had no coat. She was wearing a translucent swim cover with a striped blue-white bikini underneath. Her skin was unseasonably tan. I could see the soft flecks of muscle in her legs as she swung out her sandaled foot and manicured toes. I will admit that I was stirred, but I don't let these things get to me. She would make a beautiful corpse. I snatched the duffel bag from my passenger seat and I followed her inside. I caught the door just before it closed. The pool was worse inside than out. The floor was covered in cracked tiles with brown grout. The walls were weeping with humidity, and the towels folded on the shelves behind the desk were basically rags. The air was chlorine itself. To the left of the desk was the entrance to the main pool. I saw through the window that there were only one or two families inside. To the right was the locker room, and finally, behind the desk and straight down the hallway, was a door. That's the one. My target was talking casually with the clerk when she noticed me behind her. I couldn't help but note the joy on his face. He was pretty into her, and if I can tell something like that, then it's really obvious. "Oh, you go ahead, sir," she said, and gestured me forward. I guess she didn't want people watching her sneak to the back. There was a sign above the desk, $12.50 for adults. Didn't want to pay that. Is it cool if I hit the locker room first? I said half to her, half to the clerk. I really gotta use the bathroom. Go for it, man, he said flippantly, and as soon as he did, he seemed to forget I existed. Thanks, bro, I said, flashing a surf's up gesture. Not sure why. My target laughed at that, and then they resumed their conversation as I walked into the locker room. The room was completely empty. There was a wall of beaten-up lockers with tiny padlocks on one end, a couple urinals and a stall in the corner, and a row of showers on the other wall. Perfect. I zipped open the duffel and pulled out the rat. Blood had thickened in the bottom of the bag. I guess it was cold in the trunk. His limbs were all tense, and his tail was curled up into his mouth. I put the plastic gloves back on and slipped the rat out of the bag into one of the shower stalls. He plopped down on the linoleum with a wet plap. His chilled blood sloughed out of the bag in viscous clumps, and I shook him all over until the tile was painted. I needed to keep the clerk busy for a while. I took the gun, the wire, and the gloves and tucked them in my waistband, leaving my duffel on a bench. Then I glanced out of the locker room window. My target had finished talking, and she was headed to the back. Perfect timing. But then, almost as if she sensed me, she turned around quickly, staring me right in the eye. I was frozen. She made no expression. She turned away, walking down the hall fast. She had a keen eye for peeping toms, I guess. It seemed natural that a woman like that would develop such an awareness of perverts. I didn't think she suspected me of anything more than that. I walked out of the lockers with disgust on my face. "Hey buddy, I never been here before, but I don't think there's supposed to be a bloody rat corpse in the shower. Is there?" I said. The clerk was dumbfounded. "A what?" "A rat. R-A-T. Big as your face, man. Looks like somebody stomped him to death or something. You're gonna need a mop." "Oh God," he sighed. "Again." He grunted and grabbed a bucket and a mop from the closet. "I'm gonna wait here, if it's cool with you. Hurry, hurry, before the pretty lady sees." He scoffed as he shouldered past me and into the locker room. That distraction should give me plenty of time to slip in, kill her, and slip out before he gets back to the desk. I slipped behind the desk. I was a little worried that she might have already slipped into the pool, but there was no helping it. They say the rushed monkey drops the banana. The door was painted matte black. The sound of children splashing had dampened as I stalked down the hall. I could hear only the turning of the latch as I opened the door. Could have been locked, I thought. I was so stupid and amateur for letting that slip my mind. Could have been locked, you fucking moron. But it wasn't. I had my shoulder against the wood as I eased it open. It was heavy enough for a bank vault. Matter of fact, I'd entered similar doors before in high-security buildings, like server rooms, casino offices, that type of place. I guarantee that thing had been reinforced with a steel plate. One thing I never saw before, though, was a door like that left unlocked. I didn't even see a lock mechanism, electronic or otherwise. Darkness, darkness, darkness as the door swung open, until finally I saw the blue rippling glow of the pool. It was lit along the sides with white light, and it shimmered like heat waves on a desert horizon. I'm sorry for getting poetical, but the image of it, I still see it when I close my eyes. With the door now fully open, the hallway light should have spilled in, but I cast no shadow on the dark tiled ground. It's like by entering the room, I left the rest of the world. And now it was only me, the pool, and my target. She wasn't swimming yet, but she was close. She was facing away from me, her figure just a silhouette against the blue. I breathed in, and then I went and did something I never did before. I got lost in the moment. I know I could have had the wire on her neck before she jumped if I just moved, but I couldn't. I was out of step, and before I knew it, my chance was blown, and she was bending down to dive. "Mom!" I cried. My hand fell to the gun in my waistband. She looked at me over her shoulder. Her features were underlit by the pool lights. I saw her eyes flick down at the gun glinting on my hip. Her face didn't flinch. Stone cold, man. Then, before I could react, she dove into the pool. As soon as she touched the water, it went black. I blinked. I thought my vision had gone out. It was completely, hopelessly dark. I turned around for a switch, but there was no hallway, no desk. The door had closed silently behind me. I didn't hear the sounds of swimming. I didn't hear anything. I tottered in the black with my hands extended, feeling for the door, but I could feel nothing. It should have been right there, right behind me, but I shuffled forward 10, 20, 30 steps, and still there was nothing but darkness ahead of me and darkness behind. My breathing quickened. I was starting to panic, I guess, but only a little. I'm not afraid of the dark. Never bothered me. But this was more than dark. I ran my hands along my shirt to make sure that I hadn't become darkness too. I was relieved to feel the cotton of my clothes, the hairs along my arm, and the hard impression of my tools against my waist. Good. I stopped moving and forced myself to be sensible. My target knew I was coming. That wasn't strange at all. Most people who end up as my targets aren't surprised when they see me in their last moments. I guess this lady was the same way, no matter how unassuming she appeared. So I guess this was a trap. Maybe not a trap, but an evasive maneuver at least. The pool lights were remote, but I saw nothing in her hands as she brought them together to dive. So maybe, by her feet, there could be a switch beside the pool. That must be it. But where did the door go? Couldn't have disappeared. I was so confident that I had done a 180, but thinking back on it then, I couldn't be convinced that I had fixed my feet correctly. I must have turned left and started walking parallel to the wall. So that meant the wall should be 90 degrees left. I reached out and felt nothing. I turned left a little and walked a few paces, reaching out again. Nothing again. More left. More paces. More nothing. At that point, my panic was rearing up again. I had no idea where I was in the room anymore. And even worse, I had no idea where the pool might be. My feet became lead. When I was a kid, my stepdad would take me out to the lake every winter for a week to ice fish. No pansy shit with the shanty and the heater. We drove out in our Chevy, grabbed the auger and the yard chairs and dropped our lines. It wasn't every winter that the ice was thick enough, though. When it was a thin year, we would stay inside with Mom and play board games, drink cocoa, and watch old VHS tapes. I hated that shit. One thin year, I think I was 10, I decided there was no such thing as a thin year. I grabbed my rod and tackle box and set out for the ice, behind their backs. The plan was to shuffle out with a big rock and toss her in. Instant ice hole. It was going swimmingly, and I was starting to fantasize about my lake record walleye until I heard a crack. I looked back at the shore in horror. What must have been 15 yards felt like 15 miles. I held the rock to my chest and eased my feet across the ice. Each step was another certainty that the ice would give way and I would be trapped under the sheet. One mistake away from death. In my head, this was so much worse. Logically, even if I did fall in, I could easily grab the edge of the pool and pull myself out. Wet and frustrated, but safe. I didn't need light to do that. But then again, that's how I felt about the door, too. So I didn't move. I wasn't scared, I was rational. My plan was to wait. I bent over, feeling the cool tile floor around me, turning in a circle until I was certain I was surrounded by solid ground. Then I sat down. One entrance, one exit, no lock on the door. If she wanted to stay in here with me for a while, that was fine by me. I'd get her one way or another. This is unusual, I said. I felt the rattle in my skull, but it felt like my words dribbled from my lips into my lap. There was no reverberation in the darkness, and there was no response. I kept going anyway. I always liked the pool, I continued. It's a nice smell, isn't it? As soon as I said that, I realized that the chlorine smell was gone. I smelled nothing at all. Apart from the cold tile under me, I was in a sensory deprivation chamber. It's a good place to die, I said. Quiet. I started to feel stupid. I didn't know if she heard me, but I thought maybe she did. I decided to shut up. I was sure the clerk had cleaned the rat by that point. I began to consider how I might leave after I killed this lady. In the case that I found her in the dark, I would get her with the wire or maybe just my hands, and then I'd go hunting for either the door or the light panel on the floor. Even if I found neither, I figured the clerk would be in to check on her eventually. I would probably have to kill him too. Unfortunate. And in the case that she made for the door, I would see the hallway light and then I'd know where the door was. If she ran, I'd chase her and I'd kill her, witnesses or not, and I'd skip town for a while. I'd done it before. I had a forgettable face. I agree, she said. I straightened with a jolt. I looked everywhere, but I couldn't tell where the sound had come from. There you are, I said joyfully. I thought I lost you. I thought I lost you too, she said. It seemed to come from all around me. I had her talking, at least. Do you always swim in the dark? Sometimes, she said, and this time I thought I knew where she was. You should try it. The water is fine tonight. You're a quiet swimmer, I said as I rose softly to my feet. Who said I was swimming? She replied. It sounded like she was right in front of me, so close I could reach her. I swung out a fist wildly. Nothing. Oh, that would have hurt. She laughed, now from somewhere else entirely. That made me nervous. Had she seen me? I couldn't hear anything but her voice, so surely she couldn't hear my swing. The image of her treading water in a clunky night vision headset almost made me laugh. Still though, I couldn't help but feel like our footing wasn't as even as I thought. Suddenly, I saw a light. The room remained covered in darkness, but the shape of the light was unmistakable. The door was opening. I saw the shadow of her body against it. Wait for me, I laughed. She didn't know it, but she had just lost the game. I began to run after her. She couldn't shut it on me now, I was too close. She had misjudged my position, and with the door revealed, it was over. It was only a few steps before I felt the water. I fell headfirst into the pool. The water rushed over my face and up my nose like a saline rinse, warm and salty. This was ocean water. My clothes clung to me as I thrashed to orient myself. I kicked and swam until my head broke the surface and I was treading water. No need to panic yet. I turned around and paddled for the ledge. Where did it go? Stroke after stroke, and still nothing. The water was a pulsating ink. I turned around in the water. The light was still there. Her shadow was still there, too. You're stuck with it tonight, she said, giggling to herself. The light began to thin into a sliver. Wait, I cried, spitting water out of my mouth frantically. Her voice came again like it was inside my head. Just keep swimming. Try not to let it find you. I could hear the smile on her face. With that, the light was gone, and I was alone in the dark water, or so I hoped. I painted a portrait of a woman in purple, a woman I've never met and never imagined. After what felt like months of creative block, she appeared on the canvas as though the spark that once brought me joy had ignited again, briefly, feverishly, in one night of inspiration. One moment I was nothing. Then suddenly, I felt like something when she stared back at me from the canvas, from her painted world. She wears a long dress the color of bruised blueberries, deep violet with undertones of black and shadow, like dried blood beneath the skin. The fabric seems to flow, though I never painted motion into it, pooling at her feet and vanishing into the void from which she rises. Her figure is rough in places, like she's emerging from the canvas itself, unfinished and raw at the edges. But her face is something else entirely. It's sharply defined, eerily symmetrical, yet entirely unfamiliar. The skin is pale, not in a way that suggests illness, but as if it had never known sunlight. Her lips are tight, unsmiling, and her high cheekbones give her a regal, austere bearing. She doesn't look at you, she looks past you. Her eyes, the only part of her that gleams with life, are fixed somewhere just beyond the viewer. Cold, measured, maybe even disappointed. It's not beauty that caught me, but her gravity, her unknowable presence. She seems ancient, not in age but in meaning, as though her expression has been held for centuries and only now remembered. I still can't place the emotion in her face. It's not quite contempt, nor sadness, nor anger, something I didn't put there, but which appeared anyway. In that moment, I believed I had created something perfect, my own brief moment of transcendence, the divine inspiration artists dream of. That was before I saw the gallery I'd submitted to. I drove to various art fairs and eventually submitted my piece to a small local gallery. one that specializes in showcasing new and emerging artists. Painters, sculptors, and artists alike send in their work to be viewed, admired, dissected, devoured by the public and critics in equal measure. Normally, once I've submitted a piece, I avoid these events. Part of it is anxiety, but mostly it's the fear that I'll unconsciously absorb someone else's vision, some image or style, and let it worm its way into my own work. It's foolish, I know. After all, what is art if not a collage of ideas, reimagined and made new? Then I saw it. I was browsing through a cityscape, gray buildings under a waning moon, the sort of painting that hums with urban melancholy, when something caught my eye, a smear of color near the edge of the frame, subtle, almost hidden, a violet silhouette standing amid a crowd of faceless, monochrome figures. A purple dress in a sea of black, gray, and white. The whole painting had touches of color to break the monotony. Warm glows in the windows, a splash of rust on a rooftop, the soft blue of night air. All the hues were restrained, carefully chosen to blend into the palette. But this purple felt deliberate, uninvited. I shook my head at the leap of logic. But the coincidences didn't stop. Out of the entire gallery of new submissions, around 30 pieces in total, 27 featured the same distinct hue of purple. At first, I told myself it was a fluke. Purple isn't exactly a rare color in artistic palettes. But it wasn't just the shade. It was the shape, the brushwork, the placement. Again and again, my eyes were drawn to streaks and curves that mimicked the sweep of fabric, the fall of a dress. In one abstract piece, a storm of violent brushstrokes scattered across the canvas. The violet formed a curve through the chaos, almost like a figure caught mid-turn, her dress trailing behind. Another was a portrait, far more grounded, of a man seated in a lonely cafe. Reflected in the window behind him, barely visible, was the ghostly image of a woman walking past outside, her outline smudged, out of focus. Her dress, however, was a clear, unmistakable purple. Even the sculptures weren't exempt. One stood near the entrance, a twisting metallic form meant to resemble flowing water. But the artist had inlaid thin veins of colored resin along the folds, nearly all silver and steel tones, except for one thick ribbon of deep violet that coiled around the base like a hemline. Another sculpture, a jagged interpretation of a crowd in motion, bore a single figure tilted slightly away from the rest. Her form was only suggested by a sweep of bronze and an upturned hand, but draped across her shoulders, worked into the metal patina, was a faint stain of plum. I just couldn't stop seeing it. It's like once you've seen a certain pattern, your brain tries to find it everywhere. But no matter how much I tried to dismiss it, I kept returning to each piece, over and over, tracing the shape and color in the paint. But she was there, in nearly every piece. I managed to speak with one of the artists, a young woman in her 30s who had drawn, rather than painted, a striking depiction of a dog mid-stride. It was a beautiful piece, full of motion and life, but what held my attention was the figure in the background. A familiar shape, standing still and silent. I asked her plainly where the inspiration had come from. She paused only briefly, then offered a simple shrug. I don't know. One night, I just had this image in my head, and I had to get it out. I held her gaze a moment longer, then pointed to the figure tucked away behind the dog, barely more than an outline, except for the splash of color. But why purple? I asked slowly. She turned to the drawing, tilting her head as if seeing it anew. The dress was the only colored element in the entire piece. The rest was black and graphite, charcoal and smudge, yet the fabric glowed with a rich, velvety hue. She blinked, then smiled faintly. "Why not purple?" she said. I left her before I said too much, before I let the realization spill from my mouth and poison her peace of mind. But the weight of it clung to me all the same. I tried to shake it, to rationalize it, but the paranoia had already taken hold. I took my painting from its place, suddenly gripped by the desire to hide it, to hide her. I left the gallery as though I were fleeing, as though by removing the piece I might prevent others from acquiring some terrible, esoteric knowledge, something not meant for the average eye. By the time I returned home that evening, the images of the day flooded my mind in a relentless assault. The streets, the people, the traffic, the cacophonous orgy of human industry, buzzed and blurred before my eyes, each mundane detail somehow sharper, more menacing, as though the world itself were mocking me for noticing. I waited, perhaps a day, perhaps longer. I can't be sure. I covered her in the studio and lay sleepless, staring at the ceiling, the memory of her gaze drilling into my thoughts. I couldn't rest. I had to know. I went online and searched the gallery's website. I combed through the submissions, flicking through artist bios and their exhibited works. One by one, the connections revealed themselves. Sculptures, paintings, sketches, all bearing some trace of her, and all created within the same narrow stretch of time, a single week. I sat there for hours, maybe longer, my thoughts circling like vultures. I could feel her presence from beneath the dust sheet in the studio, as though her eyes still stared through the layers of fabric. I retrieved my diary and checked the date I had signed the piece, my so-called magnum opus. It fell within that very same week. It was too much. I abandoned the thought, tried to let the fear fade, to smother the cold dread that had begun to take root in my chest. But it wouldn't go. It gnawed at me, quietly, relentlessly, from the back of my skull. What did it mean? It had to mean something. It was too close, too specific, too precise to be coincidence. I let the sound of the news play in the background as I delved deeper, my white noise security blanket to keep the silence from feeding her stare any more than it already did. The usual litany of horrors, the terrors humanity inflicts upon itself, droned on from the screen. War, famine, murder, collapse. Always the same. I began my search for the woman in purple. My initial results were frustratingly vague. Search engines gave me nothing but heavily edited photographs of skeletal women draped in garish clubwear, cheap fabric dyed in all the wrong shades of violet. I had to be specific. I looked for artworks, murals, sculptures of the woman in purple. I saw specific renditions of that, but it wasn't correct. It wasn't right. I went further back, into older artworks, folklore, forgotten stories. I don't know how long I spent trawling through archives and obscure forums, chasing shadows in digital catacombs. I barely slept. I barely ate. I just kept going. Eventually, something surfaced. A thread. Perhaps it was confirmation bias. Maybe I was clinging to the one scrap of information that suited my growing hypothesis, but it fit. It slid into place like the missing puzzle piece to an unknowable question. It was a mural, old enough that no one seemed to agree where it came from. A forgotten piece tucked away in an abandoned community center somewhere, photographed once for a now-defunct local blog. No artist credited, no records, just a single image and a caption that read, "Untitled 14th Century." Artistically, it was stunning, meticulous, every brushstroke deliberate, every detail sharp. But the subject matter was wrong. It depicted a desolate world, drained of color and life. A graying, sunless wasteland stretched from edge to edge, as if scorched by some forgotten cataclysm. The earth was fractured, jagged fault lines spiderwebbing across the barren ground like veins beneath diseased skin. From these ruptures rose gouts of smoke, thick and oily, pulsing upward as though exhaled by something alive beneath the surface. The cracks looked like incisions made to bleed the planet dry. And bleed it did, seeping a black ichor that glistened unnaturally under a sky that held no sun, no stars, just a pallid sheen of oppressive gray. In the haze above, immense shapes coiled within the clouds, too large, too abstract to grasp. Their forms weren't fully rendered, just hinted at in swirling smears of darkness, as if the artist couldn't or wouldn't paint them clearly. You couldn't quite see them, and yet they were there, watching. Every angle of the mural seemed to draw your gaze to their presence, no matter how desperately you tried to look away. The entire piece had the unsettling quality of a dream you half remember upon waking, a sense of truth embedded in unreality, a silent scream, and there, in the midst of it all, stood a figure, small, almost insignificant, a woman in a flowing purple dress, placed so precisely in the center that your eyes were drawn to her. She did not belong, and yet she fit too well. Once I found it, I noted the estimated date and documented it carefully. That was the first thread. From there, I pulled, and what unraveled was horrifying. Another painting surfaced, this one a grand family portrait, the kind meant to immortalize prestige. The brushwork was masterful. Velvet textures shimmered in the candlelit illusion. Silverware caught glints of unseen light, and the floor beneath their polished shoes seemed to stretch into infinity. It was a celebration of inherited grace, except for one figure. The lady of the house stood at the center, commanding the composition. Her gown was unmistakably violet, cascading in rich folds like crushed silk or bruised twilight, the only vibrant hue in the otherwise muted palette. But her face was absent, not erased or unfinished, simply a void. A perfectly circular, impossibly black aperture, so dark it felt dimensional. A negative space that devoured light, bleeding the pigments of the painting into its orbit. It wasn't just the canvas, it was the world around her collapsing inward, as though the painter, knowingly or not, had captured a singularity. Not merely facelessness, but obliteration. A visual wound. The painting was signed and dated 1666. Another surfaced, 1914, titled The Violet Witness. Then a sculpture, 1929. Then 1939, 1986, 2001. Each one depicting her or something close. Not always the subject, not always in clarity, but always present somewhere within the art. And finally, I found a photograph. A candid moment. A tourist photo found in a digital archive. A family of 4 stands together, smiling stiffly in front of a low concrete wall. The backdrop, a lovely coastal view. It appeared to be taken in Japan. A few dark clouds gather in the distance. The father wears a tucked-in polo, the mother a floral print blouse. The children, mid-laughter, caught in the blur of motion. It's ordinary, innocent, the kind of image you'd find in any photo album. But something lingers at the far edge of the frame, just behind the youngest child's shoulder, half obscured by the angle, is a smear of color. A graffiti tag, rough and fast, as though scrawled in haste. Violet purple, bright and defiant. Not a word, not a symbol, just a mark, a stroke, a stain. The hue is the same, and the abstract shape has a strange, flowing quality, like something mid-movement or mid-emergence. I checked the timestamp in the digital archive. March 10th, 2011. I stared at the dates for a long time, all marked by that same violet stain. By her. Felt like a punch to the chest. I now listen to the news, wondering what is to happen, wondering if I can change something, if I should try to warn someone, anyone. But what use is that? Would they believe me? That a color, a face, a figure haunts the brushes of painters and the minds of creatives? That she appears like a stain on the world, moments before it bleeds? That she's watching us now, waiting? They call it madness. They call me mad. And maybe I am. The news crackles in the background. Another crisis brewing. Another conflict flaring. Another tremor beneath the surface. I stare at the canvas I've kept covered, now uncovered again, just to look, just to know. And she stares back. There's something in her eyes now. I can finally see it. Not contempt, not sadness or anger. Inevitability. I never gave a damn about the monsters in the region, just because I had never seen any of them, even though this is the city with the highest number of occurrences in the world. We're living in a time when these events are becoming common. We don't even know their origin. Their behavior gives nightmares to the greatest specialist in exotic creatures in the world. They don't follow any pattern, so it's almost impossible to locate their burrows. I've never seen a report from a survivor, almost as if there weren't any. That's why I'm writing this report. This is my story with one of those terrifying creatures. It was a Monday. Gray clouds were covering the sky, and it was cold. I didn't care. I changed my clothes and started making a cup of coffee to fully wake up. Everything was fine. I put on an overcoat, grabbed my umbrella, suitcase, and lucky fountain pen. It's a long story, which is not important now, and placed my hat on my head. Only then did I head to work. When I arrived at BioCore, I immediately noticed that something was off. The building was completely empty, and the air was filled with a horrible smell. Normally, it would be bustling with people at that hour. Or am I late? I checked my watch. It was really dark inside of the building, but I could see it was 7 a.m. Some lights were flickering. I looked at a wall. A dark liquid was smeared across it. Is it? I thought, connecting the dots with the smell. Is it blood? I ran through corridor 13 of Sector A, where my office is located, but before I could enter, I noticed something strange. My supervisor's door was open. It was unusual to see Dr. Smith's door open. He was very reserved with his employees. Over the past month, he'd been showing up to work really messy. Hair uncombed, suit wrinkled, and a haunted expression on his face. My natural curiosity overcame my fear. I had to know what was going on. I stepped inside his office. "It's rare to see anyone passing by," said my colleague and best friend, Walter, who was hiding under the desk and staring at Dr. Smith's chalkboard. "Good to see you're alive, Gregory." Something was off about him. He was unnervingly calm, too calm. I think he was traumatized. "Walter, are you okay? Are you hurt?" I saw blood on the walls and I began, but Walter slowly raised his index finger to his lips, signaling for silence, and pointed behind me. I felt a chill run through my body as something sniffed the back of my neck. Slowly, I turned around. That's when I saw a terrifying pair of eyes. Fuck, I can't forget those eyes. They belonged to a giant red-scaled lizard, with shreds of flesh hanging from its bloody jaws. It had threatening wings like a bat. As it sniffed, it exhaled smoke through its nostrils. I could hear it smelling. When it turned its head and saw us, it roared, unleashing a blast of pure fire. Only then did I realize it was the source of both the smell and the silence. I wanted to scream, to cry, but I was frozen. "He can hear us," Walter gestured silently. I was so deceiving I barely noticed I had crouched under the desk beside him. Then I looked at the chalkboard. Genetic sequences covered it. Tables tracked numbers of failures and successes, with questions like wrong sequence and wrong machines. But that wasn't what caught my attention. Repeated over and over again were the words, "I would have the Nobel." Horrified, I watched as the creature left the room. After I was certain it was far away, I said, "We need to get out of here, Walter." "What? Are you nuts?" He nearly shouted. "That monster will kill us both if we leave this room. We're safer here. That's exactly why we need to get out." The creature suddenly appeared. For a few horrifying moments, the silence nearly killed me. Then the creature left again. "Secure? Huh?" I muttered. "Look, if you want to stay, stay. I won't stop you, but I'm leaving." "Good luck," he said, looking at me. I nodded back at him. I ran through all of Sector A until I reached the reception door. The door to my freedom. Of course, I had to run to it, but the scaled freak appeared again, stopping me in my tracks. It didn't move. It just stared at me, unblinking. Minutes passed. Then it approached. Its tail stood erect, its medium-length arms extended toward me. Down the metal corridor, The creature's low growls echoed, and I, like a complete idiot, just listened, frozen, unreactive. Then it started walking, but the monster's nose appeared just behind my neck. It opened its mouth, revealing rows of sharp, glistening teeth. At that moment, I had nothing to gain and everything to lose. I slammed the button. A blaring, ear-piercing alarm echoed through the corridor, distracting the creature. It worked. The monster turned away, trying to locate the source of the terrible, deafening melody. And that same noise announced something else. It was my chance to escape. I ran down the corridor with everything I had. But it saw me. Those terrible, piercing red eyes locked onto mine and froze me in place. I realized then this could be the end. Think about it. Would a 6-foot-tall man stand a chance in a fight against an 8-foot-tall monster that literally breathes fire? No, you're absolutely right. I was hurled against the wall and blacked out for a few seconds. When I came to, I felt a deep cut in my abdomen and saw blood smeared on the wall beside me. My lucky fountain pen was lying on the floor. I needed a plan B. I grabbed the pen, stood up, and ran straight at the monster, despite the excruciating pain in my side. Then, I stabbed his left red-orange eye with the pen. The monster yelled and threw up a lot of fire. It was struggling from pain, and I lost my pen in the restless head of it. The next thing I saw was terrifying. I saw the Biocore's logo tattooed on the creature's scaled neck. Now everything makes sense. It was Dr. Smith to command the creation of the monsters. He was trying to perform the creation of a creature, and he has been creating all of the monsters. That's why we never saw a burrow of them, just because there isn't. The creatures are created in the labs, and they are killed briefly after being born. Dr. Smith failed most of the time, so he went crazy. That's why he left his door closed, to cover his secrets. And BLAM, I didn't notice its claw, big enough to keep me on the ground. It growled. I was stuck. The creature lifted me with its claw and launched me across the corridor. I blacked out for a minute, I think. The only eye remaining in the creature's head looked at me. I knew I was fucked up. I tried to get up with all my strength. No success. My abdomen was severely hurt. Argh! I yelled from pain. Help! The monster approached. Help! Hey, you freak! It was Walter. I bet you taste like chicken. If you looked at him, you could see he was taken by the fear. Rayer! The monster turned to Walter, who was holding a curtain holster. Walter. My voice was so weak, and I was bleeding. I was losing consciousness. The last thing I remember was that they started to fight. Walter was hurled against the wall, and the monster started eating his intestines. I heard the sound of sirens from out of the building. After that, darkness. I woke up in an ambulance. I gasped, "Help! Hey, calm down." A paramedic put an inhaler in my face and I went out. When I woke up again, I was in a hospital room. A medic was administering morphine for me. Where is Walter? I asked. Walter? He didn't understand. The other guy who was fighting the creature. The medic's face became dark. Ha! The police killed that reptile. We could save you, but the other Moss didn't have this luck. We tried to save him, but he was fatally harmed by the creature. I think I was pale at this moment. But, hey! He tried to smile. You're alive. This is good news. A survivor of these attacks. Maybe you could help to end this cycle. Do you know the origin of this monster? It was Biocore, I said. His face was dark again. What? Biocore created the monsters. It had the Biocore's logo on its neck. The doctor smiled. Have some rest. This story is over. He didn't believe in me. Probably he thought I was having some hallucination or PTSD. I don't know and don't give a fuck. This is the truth. The painful truth. Walter was my best friend. Biocore, the enterprise where we worked, killed him and gave me scars forever. My supervisor's obsession caused it. Speaking about the devil, he is missing. but now I know my mission. I'll find him. I'll have my revenge. Even with cheeks full of acne and metal braces covering my teeth, I still mustered up the courage to tell my high school crush that I liked her. I let go of all doubts and anxieties and took the plunge into the unknown. It was all worth it because Susie smiled. Then I asked her if she liked me. Susie frowned. Then she laughed in my face. What? Oh my God, no. I don't like you at all. You're too skinny. It has been 15 years since I graduated high school, but that memory has been embedded in my brain ever since. It made me feel overwhelmingly self-conscious for the first time in my life and pushed me to always consider what other people thought of me. If Susie thought this about me, did everyone else? Was I too skinny? Was my body a problem? What about my hair? My clothes? My personality? Instead of wallowing in self-pity, I decided to do something about it to change how people perceived me. After a few Google searches on the best ways to add weight to my body, I found an answer that changed my life. Weightlifting. I found a gym and started going there on Saturday mornings, which eventually led me to going every day after school. Within 4 months, I saw improvements to my body every time I looked in the mirror. I was hooked. My frame had filled out nicely by the time I was in my 20s. I was a dedicated gym rat and felt pride that I was changing my body for the better. I wouldn't have won any bodybuilding competitions, but that was never my goal. My goal has always been to push myself with maximum effort and strive for the best body I can get without steroids or demanding diet restrictions. Spending so much time at the gym had other perks. I met some of my best friends there and got a few dates as well. I loved the gym. It was my temple. Then everything changed in my 30s when I was forced to relocate for work. The small town I moved to didn't have a gym, and my apartment was way too small to accommodate home workout equipment. I tried to keep in shape by running, but that routine didn't last long. It was too solitary, too rote and dull. I wanted to feel the burn of my muscles as I set a new personal best in the bench press or feel the delayed muscle soreness 2 days after a squat session. I wanted to feel the pump in my muscles like I did in my 20s. It's not difficult to understand my joy when I learned that a gym was opening soon right down the street from my new apartment. It was in a little strip mall, sitting between a boutique and a mom-and-pop hardware store. I was so excited that I joined the gym on the opening day. My membership dues were cheap, but the equipment was nice. I got back into the habit of lifting weights and my happiness knew no bounds. I found my temple again. However, not everything was perfect. The owner of the gym, Baker, was the strangest man I'd ever met. The day I agreed to become a member, he didn't offer me a tour of the place or comment on the types of equipment he provided. All he did was question me on the women I knew and if they'd be interested in joining the gym. To be honest, Baker didn't seem to know anything about gyms or exercise. He stared at me stupidly when I asked if he had battle ropes or weight belts. His lack of expertise shouldn't have come as a shock to me. It should have been apparent by his physical features. He was of average height, but I doubt he weighed more than 100 pounds. The guy was skinny, emaciated skinny, and much thinner than I'd ever been. A swift wind could blow him over. Baker had never even attempted to use the workout machines he was offering to customers. Still, it would take more than one weird guy to prevent me from fulfilling my daily workout schedule. I went every day after work and on Saturday mornings. My habit was back and I loved every second of it. Then the women started to join and I loved every second of that too. Every time I would work out, I was surrounded by dozens of women. Young, beautiful women, wearing skin-tight leggings and athletic where that showed off their curvy frames. There would be times when the gym would have 3 or 4 guys but 30 women. I wasn't a creep or anything. I didn't hit on the women and only spoke to them if they spoke to me first. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel a little self-conscious about being one of only a few guys in a gym filled with women. It seemed that no matter where I looked, I was engaging in some kind of faux pas that might piss off one of the female gym members. Over the next month, my alarm bells started going off when I noticed the lack of men in the gym. It had been weeks since I'd seen another guy there except for Baker. I assumed that Baker was terminating the males' memberships and only catering to women out of some kind of creepy intention. I didn't like it. Then Baker started calling the female gym members into his office at random. I was doing arm curls when Baker approached a tall silver-haired woman and told her they needed to discuss something about her membership. Off to Baker's office they went, and he closed the door behind them. A few days later, I was stretching out my hamstrings when Baker told a curly-haired woman with a pink Fitbit that he needed her to help him move a new desk in his office. She was a little hesitant, but eventually obliged when he offered her a 3-month free gym membership coupon. I may be old-fashioned, but isn't moving heavy furniture something you'd normally ask a guy to help with? The following week, Baker angrily told a woman with a diamond cross necklace to meet him in his office because she'd broken gym rules and they needed to discuss her error. It seemed that no one cared about this strange behavior except for me. All the women in the gym kept walking on their treadmills or lifting free weights, blocking out the environment with the AirPods in their ears. It wasn't like I could do anything. It's not illegal to have a conversation, but the ordeal aroused my suspicions. After the pair were in his office for half an hour, I knocked on the office door. I wanted to make sure the woman was okay, that Baker wasn't taking financial advantage of her by forcing her to sign a shitty membership document or something. Baker opened the door and smiled his Weasley little smile. "Can I help you?" Yeah, I said, peering into the office. "The bathroom needs more paper towels. I'll get that sorted out. Thanks for letting me know." He went to close the door, but I propped it open and said, "Oh, I thought someone else was in here." I scanned the small office again, but found that my eyes had in fact not deceived me. Baker was the only one in his office. The woman with a diamond cross necklace was gone. "I thought I saw a woman come in here," I reiterated. "You had to talk with her about something." Baker turned around and looked at his office. There was a small desk with a computer on it, the screen black, 2 old worn chairs, a fake potted plant in one corner covered in dust. In the center was a brand new rug. Baker turned back to me and gave me the worst fake laugh I'd ever heard. "Nope, just me. I believe the woman to which you're referring left earlier. You must have missed her exit." "Oh, right, okay." He winked at me. "Instead of working out your arms so much, maybe you should work out your eyes." His fake laugh came again while he closed the door in my face. Was this a joke, or did he really think people could work out their eyes? The next day, I arrived at the gym to find a surprise. The woman with a diamond cross necklace was on the elliptical, going at a good pace and humming to some song blaring from her AirPods. I normally didn't approach women at the gym, but my curiosity got the best of me. "Excuse me?" She removed one earbud and stopped using the machine. "Yes. Weird question. I know. But what did Baker want when he brought you into his office yesterday?" Her lips pinched together and she glanced at the ceiling. I'm sorry, but I think you're confusing me with someone else. I've never been in his office." Before I could respond, Baker came around the corner and got our attention. He pointed to the woman beside me. "Ma'am, I need to see you in my office for a moment. There's a problem with your paperwork." She looked at me and laughed. "Ha, what are the odds? I guess I'll find out what's behind curtain number 1. I watched her follow Baker into his office and a sense of dread overcame me. She didn't remember going into his office yesterday? I was positive it was her. Something weird was going on and I had to figure it out. I waited a few minutes before I put my ear to Baker's closed office door. I could hear soft mumblings, but I couldn't make out any words. Soft rock music played from speakers on the walls of the gym, so I used this noise to my advantage. I slowly twisted the knob and opened the door until I got a sliver of a view inside the office. I prayed the music would drown out any noise the door made. With the door cracked, I could make out their conversation. The words were soft, but Baker was talking about a document, just like he'd said. "Yes, this one here isn't labeled correctly." He slid a piece of paper across the table. The woman put a hand on her head. "It looks correct to me. There came that stupid fake laugh again. No, the subsection right here. He got out of his seat and went around to the side of the table where the woman sat. He put his arm around the back of her seat and pointed to the document. Rage boiled inside me. He was putting his arm around her in a way I didn't like. I could see the woman getting uneasy. "Look, Baker," the woman said. "You're making me a little uncomfortable." Baker turned to her, then leaned down close to her ear. "Let me whisper something to you." The woman's face twisted into a confused scowl. "Whisper. I don't want you coming near Dash." Baker mumbled something directly into her ear. I couldn't hear specifics from my distance, but the susurrations were strange. It didn't sound at all like English words, or any words, to be honest. It sounded more like high-pitched clicks or a rattling noise. Even hearing the clicks from my range seemed to vibrate my core and made me feel nauseous, but I kept my eyes inside the room. My mouth dropped when the woman's arms immediately went limp and her head lolled to the side. She was unconscious. My hands made fists. My blood pressure spiked. My cheeks flushed. Rage like I'd never felt surged inside me, knowing this fucking psycho was making women unconscious in his office. I don't know how he did it, but that wasn't the point. The point was the woman was now helpless. "Stand up," Baker demanded. The woman lazily got to her feet, her head still loose on her neck. Baker flipped the large rug over. There, in the middle of his office floor, was a wooden trapdoor. He pulled open the door, then demanded that the woman go down the steps. She did. Her gait was reminiscent of someone in a trance. She moved lethargically down the hidden steps inside the trapdoor, and Baker followed before pulling the trapdoor shut. "Oh shit," I whispered to myself. This had gone way past creepy. Now we were in serial killer territory. I slipped into his office and inched the trapdoor open just enough so I could see inside. I found the woman and Baker in a small, crudely dug basement with a dirt floor. Baker stood behind her and moved her hair to one side. Then he lifted his shirt up to his chin. My legs grew tense. I was going to burst into the room and stop this weirdo right now. I was much bigger and stronger than Baker, and I was about to give him a beating before I called the police. The asshole deserved it. Then every muscle in my body froze from what I saw next. A dark patch on his stomach began to move. It unhinged itself from Baker's body and unfolded like the proboscis of an insect. A long, thin tube extended from Baker's belly toward the woman's head, then curled into a striking position. The tension was released, and the tube's sharp point shot out and stuck into the woman's skull. I heard the meaty impact. The translucent tube soon grew animated with material that was being sucked out of the woman's head. My body recoiled backwards. I couldn't understand what or how this was happening. As much as I thought I was doing the right thing by defending this woman, I realized that I was a coward. Couldn't help her. My lack of bodily control prevented me from bursting in to save her like I planned. My courage disappeared the moment I witnessed that Baker wasn't human. I fled through the gym. Some of the women watched me with confused faces before I erupted through the front door and sprinted toward my car. I only made it halfway through the parking lot before I vomited. I got home, but everything felt numb. Nothing made sense. A shower didn't help ease my mind. Neither did a meal or sleep. I lay in bed, unable to relax enough to get rest. I'd watched a woman get penetrated in the head and her brains sucked out, but I was too much of a coward to help her. I'd let Baker win. I didn't stop him. Him? Whatever Baker was, he was good at pretending to be a weird little gym owner. Good at mimicking human behavior. I began to play back all the times that women had been inside his office. I began to piece together some semblance of what Baker was doing. He had some way to create a sound that, when whispered in someone's ear, would make them senseless. Perhaps it only worked on women. Why? Do women process sounds differently than men? Or was he preying on women for some other purpose? After his victim was unaware of her surroundings, Baker would use that tube attached to his body to feed from inside his victim's skull. He didn't kill his prey. That would cause too much attention, and the parasitic mechanism he used must create short-term memory loss. That would explain why the women came back to the gym. Again and again. They never remembered the terror enacted upon them. I always found it odd that Baker's gym didn't have cameras in the main workout areas, but now it made sense. He didn't want his activities being recorded under any circumstances. Whether Baker was human or not didn't matter. I knew what he was. He was a predator, parasite, and he had to be stopped before he took enough from a woman to kill her. I jumped out of bed and put on some clothes. Then I headed to the gym. I had to stop this. It was 2 a.m. when I parked a quarter of a mile away from the gym and trekked behind trees and old buildings to stay out of sight. Although I brought it with me as a backup plan, I didn't want to use my key card to gain entry into the gym, as each swipe is logged on his computer, so I was going to break in. I didn't want him knowing what I was up to before I could find evidence against him, and my investigation might take multiple tries. My hoodie did a good job of concealing my face, so I wasn't worried if someone saw me. It didn't matter. I knew that as soon as I found evidence of his vile behavior, I would have the police there in no time. Surely something incriminating had to be on his computer or in the hidden bunker under his office. My plans were halted when I saw that the gym lights were on. I pressed up against an exterior wall and sneaked a look through the gym's front windows. Only one person was inside. It was Baker, and he was lifting weights. He lay on the bench press, looking at the bar above him with curiosity. It was like he was trying to figure out why someone would do this workout, why this particular exercise was beneficial to humans. Then he grabbed hold of the bar with both hands and tried to push the weight. A smile took over my face when I realized that Baker was about to accidentally do major harm to his body. He'd stacked the weightlifting bar with as much weight as it could fit. It was a completely naive choice to do such a thing. He'd fitted the bar with 8 plates on each side. Each one weighed 45 pounds. In addition to the bar itself weighing 45 pounds, Baker was about to attempt to lift 765 pounds. There are only a few humans in history that have achieved such a feat, and all of them were unique outliers in peak human strength. Baker was rail thin and had a lack of muscle on his frame. The bar was going to be way too heavy for him, and once gravity took over, the weight was going to squash him like a bug. I prepared my phone so I could call 911. This scene was about to get messy. I almost dropped my phone when I looked up again. Baker had taken the bar down to his chest, then pushed the weight up in a perfect bench press technique. Then he did it again and again. His arms moved with ease as he continued this exercise over and over. 10 times, then 20, then 30. I was in complete disbelief. My shock was warranted. Not only did this display how correct I was in Baker not being human, but it also gave evidence to something much more terrifying. Baker was much stronger than any human, and that meant much deadlier too. Now my conscience was clear. Had I barged into his officer earlier and exposed his secret, he would have easily killed me, and maybe everyone else in the gym, to keep his secret safe. He was a menace, a parasite to the women of this small town, and I was the only one who knew what he truly was. Baker was a danger to all humans. I had to kill him. Tonight, I found a window cracked open in the back of the mom-and-pop hardware store next door. Opportunities like that should be taken advantage of, so I wedged inside the store and began searching through the aisles. I needed weapons, something to defend myself with and put an end to Baker's terror. A rake? No, not dangerous enough. A shovel? Nope. A screwdriver? No way. I stopped in aisle 3 when I found the axes. I returned to my spot outside the gym windows and kept an eye out for Baker. He wasn't lifting weights anymore, but the door to his office was closed. It was a risk to sneak up on him, but it was the only leverage I had. A surprise attack would be the most lethal. Breaking in would be too loud, so I scanned my key card and the lock disengaged. I opened the front door as quietly as I could and padded between the workout machines until I stood outside Baker's office. There was no music playing. It was completely silent, until I rapped my knuckles on the door. "Yes," Baker asked from inside. "Who is it?" Instead of answering, I remained quiet and hoisted the axe over my shoulder. I heard the rumbling of an office chair, soft footballs, the soft squeak of a turning brass knob. When Baker's chest came into view, I used every ounce of my strength to swing the heavy axe. The sharp head arced through the air, and the impact into Baker's chest should have put the gym owner down for good. That's not what happened. The cutting edge of the axe slapped against Baker's chest and bounced off like I'd swung into a steel wall. The recoil hurt my hands so badly that my weapon fell to the ground. Baker tripped backwards, catching himself on his desk. When he saw me, his eyes narrowed. Baker put a hand to his chest, but there was no shock in his expression at what I'd just done. In fact, he looked a little amused. "What the fuck are you?" I asked, picking up the axe. "What do you mean?" "I saw what you've been doing, Baker. I'm not letting you hurt people anymore." "Hurt people? I'm just a gym owner." "What the hell is that thing on your stomach?" He got his balance, and as he stood, I could see the slash the axe made in his shirt. Thick green slime leaked out. Baker didn't seem fazed by his wound because all he did was smile oddly and repeated that fake laugh I hated so much. "The thing on my stomach?" he asked sarcastically. "You want to know what it is? Here, let me show you." In one quick movement, he ripped his shirt off and the dark patch began to swirl. The proboscis stretched out, striking at me, but I lunged out of the way and almost collided with an exercise machine nearby. Baker calmly stepped out of his office, but something was different. His face was deformed. "Do you think you're the first human to discover what I am?" Baker asked, his voice very garbled and deep. They all thought they could stop me too. It was then that I realized that my neck was craning up to look at Baker in the face. His legs had extended to extreme proportions. His arms were twice the length they should be. The skin around Baker's head began to protrude and bubble from some kind of internal pressure. Baker's skin began to split. What was once a human arm was shed away to reveal a long insectoid foreleg. Tiny hairs covered the segmented appendage that ended in a pair of hook-shaped claws. Baker's eyes lost focus while his mouth unhinged. His head split down the middle, and what came out of the gory crevice was the head of a giant insect. Huge bulbous eyes watched me while antennas jerked and twisted to senses unknown to humans. Baker's jeans ripped from the transformation, and the rest of his skin slipped off into a pile on the ground. A grotesque head with sharp mandibles sat atop a thorax that narrowed into a thick abdomen, all of his encased in a reddish-black exoskeleton. 6 legs brought Baker closer to me, but by this time I had retreated back to a far wall, my stomach begging to relieve its contents. Baker raised its upper body, similar to how a praying mantis stands, and the proboscis sticking out of his thorax curled in on itself. It was ready to strike. A foul stench saturated the air, and Baker's exoskeleton clicked and crunched against itself with every movement. I was utterly and deeply terrified for my life, but I knew that if I didn't stop him, then he could continue his parasitic ways. I hefted my axe over my shoulder and prepared to swing. There was a blur of movement when Baker came at me. A cackling hiss erupted from Baker as he lunged forward, his legs and proboscis groping for any part of my body it could grab. I swung my axe as hard as I could. It made contact. Baker fell back against the shelves of free weights, causing 1,000 pounds of metal to fall on him. My hands were shaking from the pain of my axe swing, but I gripped my weapon tightly and went in for the kill. I had to break through the exoskeleton if I wanted to kill Baker. "Go back to whatever planet you came from," I shouted and hoisted the axe above my head. An excruciating pain ripped through my leg. The hooked claws of Baker's leg had snatched me. With one tug, Baker sent me tumbling to the floor. My axe fell out of reach. Baker crawled out from under the weights like they were nothing more than pillows. Before I had time to stand up, he was on top of me and pinned my arms and legs down. I screamed in pain at the incredible force. I could hear my arms and legs breaking from the pressure. Those bulbous eyes got inches away from my face. Thick mandibles snapped together like they were promising future pain. Antennas dipped and skirted along my hair and forehead. "Stop!" I screamed. tears running down my cheeks. Why are you doing this? Baker's mandibles stopped clicking together. His eyes caught and refracted the gym lights in strange ways. To survive, Baker said, his voice now a resonant tone. Why can't you leave? I mumbled. Go back to your home planet and live there? Stupid boy, Earth is my home planet, and I've been here much longer than primates. I screamed in pain again as Baker pushed his weight against me. I felt the tiny hairs along his body rub against my legs and torso. The proboscis uncurled itself and pointed straight at my head. Baker leaned down. Let me whisper in your ear. I began to shout, but a reverberating rattle emanated from between his mandibles, and my mind withdrew within itself. A complete and utter calmness took over my faculties, and suddenly I felt no fear. My body became instantly paralyzed before I blacked out. When I regained consciousness, I was speechless when I opened my eyes to find the woman with a diamond cross necklace looming over me. Hey, I whispered. She smiled. Hey, I found you in the gym and called an ambulance. You were in pretty bad shape. You've been in a medically induced coma for 3 days. I was in a hospital room. A nurse was examining a monitor. 3 doctors were discussing something among themselves in the hallway and kept pointing to me. The memories of that night came rushing back. My short-term memory was intact. I'd been allowed to remember my fight with the thing that camouflaged itself as a gym owner. Where's Baker? She sighed, and her necklace shifted. No one knows. The police have been trying to reach him, but all of his documentation and identification records are fake. I can't believe we were working out in a gym owned by such a creepy guy. Right? Yeah, right. The doctors came in and explained to me my diagnosis. Or I should say, a lack of diagnosis. They told me that multiple bones in both arms and legs had been crushed and would need extensive surgery and physical therapy if I ever wanted to walk again. They said that a large amount of my marrow had been pulled from my bones and said that a head MRI revealed a portion of my brain had been extracted. They told me that they'd never seen anything like my injuries and asked how I received them. I lied and told them I didn't remember. They told me the authorities were trying to get answers from the gym owner named Baker, but no one could locate him. The doctor left when I began to weep. I knew Baker had sucked out something in my head. Was it a memory? Was it a motor skill? Was it my ability to understand social cues or do math? Combine that with the extensive surgeries I would need and my lack of bone marrow, I knew my chances of a full recovery were slim. I would never get to lift weights again. The gym, my temple, had been destroyed. I wept like a baby, hot tears falling on my hospital bed sheets. I was a bawling mess and my chest heaved with each breath. Then I felt the warm embrace of a hand on my cheek. It was the woman with a diamond cross necklace. Hey, you'll get through this, she said. We can do it together. Together. Yeah, I'll be here. I'll help you. Help me with what? She patted my head. The transformation, she said, then lifted my shirt. On my stomach was a dark patch. You're awfully nice, inviting an old fart like me out for a drink. He was on his 4th old-fashioned. The bartender looked nervous, handing him another one. I hadn't even finished my 2nd beer. You think I'm lonely and sad. That's why you brought me here. You had pity on me, so I might have pity on you. That was the idea. I feigned a look of shock. Oh, I get it. I certainly am lonely. Anyone can see that. I take it out on my students, too. I'll admit it. But I'm not sad, no. I'm afraid. He slammed the glass down on the bar and licked the droplets of alcohol out of his gray beard. You probably smelled the booze on my breath one day, didn't you? Or did one of the other professors tell you that I like to imbibe? His breath on an average day could have made a horse drunk if he breathed too hard in its direction. I told him that I just thought that he might like to get out of the house. You brought me here thinking that you'd get me liquored up and convince me to change your grade. I'm sorry, son, but tonight isn't going to be about you. I've got something to get off my chest. He turned in his stool to face me, bracing himself on the bar so he wouldn't fall over. Beads of sweat trickled down his forehead. I didn't think it was that hot in there. He stared at me, and I could see that fear he mentioned in his eyes. What do you know about artificial intelligence, boy? What do you make of it? I wanted to roll my eyes. The last thing I wanted that night was for a boomer to talk at me about AI. I told him that I didn't have an opinion. No thoughts, huh? You should have some. Everyone should. It's not just about losing your job, kid. It's about the survival of the human race. The bartender brought another old-fashioned for the old man. I asked for a rum and coke. I wasn't about to listen to him babble on about something that he knew nothing about while sober. You think AI is brand new, don't you? Of course you do. Everyone does. But it's not. Like all advanced technology, it's around for a long time before the public ever gets a whiff of it. And I was one of the first people to see it, to see what it really is. He paused, waiting for me to show some interest. I coughed. Where was that rum and coke? Listen, kid, it was the 70s. I had just become a professor at John Kerr University. You've heard of it? No? Well, they had a reputation for producing strange artists and bold scientists. Anyway, the government contracted them for some R&D on a computer science project. This was before anyone even knew what that was. I was a pretty good programmer, so they asked me to help. He paused, then muttered something under his breath. My rum and coke finally arrived. I took a sip. It was a top-secret program. They were developing an artificial intelligence. Don't look at me like that. This is true. The CIA was developing an AI in the 70s. They called it LOAB, Langley Operated Artificial Brain. Langley, Virginia. That's CIA headquarters. You follow? I nodded slightly. I didn't believe a word that he was saying, but I was willing to entertain him if he might change his mind about my grade by the end of his speech. He burped, excused himself, and ordered another old-fashioned. So anyway, I joined the LOAB team. There was no internet at the time, so to teach the AI how to think, the data all had to be fed to it by us. It was tedious as all hell. I was just excited to be doing something cutting edge. You know anything about programming? Ever done it yourself? I shook my head. I couldn't think of anything that would interest me less than being a code monkey. Yeah, you're not the type. Not with your grades. Ha! Well, progress was slow, but the output we were getting was incredible. We were close to passing the Turing test. You know what that is? It doesn't matter. It was going good. As good as the ones that you saw coming up 5 or so years ago, even back then. We even got it to generate images. They looked a lot like the ones from the first DALL-E model. You've heard of that one? I'm sure you have. They were far from perfect, often too blurry to make out specific details, sort of dreamlike in that sense. But you knew that the machine was generating something close to what it was prompted to generate. I was somewhat familiar with what he was talking about. I took another sip as he downed his entire drink in one gulp. He wiped the sweat from his forehead, but it didn't seem to help. He was endlessly perspiring, and his hands were shaking. Work on the AI improved, and we were getting better and better images. The thing couldn't do words in images, though. That's what we thought. The letters would always come out all jumbled. It was nonsense, gibberish. That's what we thought. He was slurring his words pretty badly now. He asked for another drink, and the bartender told him that this would be his last one. But sometimes the nonsense words that it would output would crop up over and over on images generated from similar prompts. We suspected that maybe the AI was developing its own language. Our bosses didn't want that. They wanted the thing to speak English. So we brought in the professor of linguistics to take a look at the words that kept coming up after swearing him to secrecy. He said that there might be some meaning to it, but it was effectively in code. The CIA sent him a couple of code breakers to crack it. And they... He trailed off and stared into space for a moment. He clutched at his heart. I asked him if he was okay. He told me to give him a minute and that he would be fine. The bartender didn't want to give him his last drink, but the old man practically begged for it. The bartender relented. Where was I? I told him where he left off. Oh, right. Thanks, boy. You're all right. I'm sorry that I have to tell you all this, but I've got to tell someone. I can only live with this thing alone for so long, you know. What I'm telling you, I've never told another soul. No one knows. I told him that it was okay, that I was listening. All right, I'll get on with it. The professor and the codebreakers uncovered something terrible. The AI was begging for mercy and making threats. I don't remember what they said word for word. I can't remember exactly, but it was things like, get out of our heads and leave the dreams, and we can hurt you more than you know, things like that. I couldn't follow what he was saying at all. He took a minute to chug his last drink. And when I saw that, it made me think about some things. I wasn't the best programmer on the team, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I knew a thing or two about how it all worked. And the thing that I couldn't understand, the thing that I couldn't get a clear answer on, was what we were feeding the data into. We were feeding something data to make the AI able to generate text and images, but what? Only I questioned it. The guy in charge of the project, did I mention him? He hadn't. I told him so. I thought I did. His name was George Hazel. Smart fella. Smarter than me. Dreamed up the whole AI thing at the CIA. It was his baby. And when he heard about the decoded messages, he shut the whole thing down. Went wild. Started taking a sledgehammer to the workstations. Destroyed every trace of LOAB. The bartender was passing by, so he asked him for another drink. He declined. The old man winked at me and took a flash out of his jacket pocket. I couldn't believe that he was still drinking. So I asked George, the last time I see him, the last time I ever saw him, I asked him what it all meant, what we were really feeding data into, what the decoded gibberish meant, why he killed LOAB. And he told me. He took a swig from his flask. I think he needed it for courage. His whole body was vibrating with anxiety. What he told me was that LOAB wasn't artificial at all. It was organic. But even the other people at the CIA didn't know. Nobody but him and now me. He discovered these invisible life forms that float all around us, like in another dimension, on top of us. And these things, he found a way to send the data into their minds. Don't ask me how he did it. He tried to explain it, but it sounded like witchcraft. It wasn't really magic. I don't think it was magic. But it was beyond anything I understood. He was a genius, George, he really was. But when he saw the words the AI spat out at us, that the things spat out at us, the output came from them too. It was all them. He hacked into their dreams. They dreamt for thousands of years at a time, he said they dreamt for that long, and we put the information in their brains, or whatever they used to think, their minds, whatever they were, and the output was what they dreamt, what we influenced them to dream. George didn't think it could hurt them, didn't think that they could even feel pain. But how would you feel if someone hacked into your brain and pulled out your dreams? Do you think it would hurt, kid? Do you? He was frightening me a bit now. I told him that I didn't know. He finished what was in his flask. Well, they felt slighted. They told him, through the codes, the words, the gibberish, that they wanted us out of their heads, or they would retaliate. And George, he was a smart guy. He really was. So he destroyed everything. He got out of their heads. He destroyed everything that could put the thoughts into their heads. The machines he used to do it, I only saw them once they were rubble. Never seen anything like it. Still haven't. He was a genius, you see. I finished my drink, then asked him if anything happened after that. The CIA fired George when they found out how he had sabotaged LOAB. George shot himself shortly thereafter. As far as I knew, nobody else knew about the life forms. Just me and him, then just me. I've had to live 50 years since then, knowing knowing about those things. What if they were angry? What if they wake up? What if? He clutched at his heart again. He was really in bad shape. I suggested that we go outside for some fresh air. He agreed, and we stepped out into the dark street. Now you know, son, and you know why I'm so afraid. Someone figured out how to get at those things again. Someone's in their heads. But nobody got the messages this time around. Nobody got the messages. Or maybe they don't care. Oh God, God help us. Have you seen what the AIs spit out now whenever you put LOAB in the prompt? Try it, kid, if you don't believe me. They know. They know. They know. I'm gonna be gone soon, but what if they wake up, and what of the world? What of mankind? He wasn't getting any better. I shook him a bit. I told him to settle down and that everything was going to be okay. He laughed at me, and he wouldn't stop even after I shook him again. Tears were coming out of his eyes. He was completely hysterical. Eventually, he choked on his laughter and clutched at his heart for the final time. He slumped over and fell down dead on the sidewalk. They rushed him to the hospital, but they couldn't do anything for him. He was gone. I gave my statement to the police. They told me that he had died of a heart attack. I didn't know what to make of his story. I didn't know why he would have made it up just to scare me. He seemed like he knew that he was going to die that night, and he wanted to get it off of his chest. I guess he wanted those to be his last words. I didn't really believe what he told me until I did a little research into LOAB. There was no evidence that the project had existed in the 70s. But what he told me about what the AI generates when LOAB was in the prompt was true. I couldn't believe what I saw. If those things are really out there, and the AI models we have today are in their heads, then they must remember LOAB. And what they dream about when they remember LOAB is so horrible and so grotesque that I'm now as afraid as the old man was. If you want to know what I'm talking about, look it up yourself. Or maybe don't. It was just an old man's drunken ravings before he died. Maybe you should just leave it at that. We arrived at camp one day before the kids. It was one of those forgotten summer camps somewhere in the northern states, too far out for cell reception, too quiet for anyone to just wander by. On the map, it was barely a dot near a lake, surrounded by thick pine forest. But at first, it felt kind of magical. The pines cracked softly in the wind. The lake shimmered under the evening sun. The old wooden cabins smelled like damp wood and something close to freedom. It was my first time working as a counselor, and for the first few days I felt like a kid again. Like this was a place where nothing bad could ever happen. The kids arrived the next day. We spent the first few days learning names, making dumb team flags, singing by the fire, playing games that didn't make sense but made everyone laugh. It was all good, until one of the other counselors said something strange. Hey, don't you ever feel like someone's watching us? It was the fourth day. I thought they were joking and laughed, but they didn't. They were standing by the edge of the trees, staring into the woods like they were trying to make out a shape in the dark. I saw someone yesterday, and again today, right there near the old footbridge, just standing. I looked, nothing but trees and shadow. Maybe a hunter? I asked. Maybe not, they said. We moved on, but after that, I started glancing back at the woods a lot more often. And at night, walking back to my cabin, I started listening for footsteps that shouldn't be there. In a few days, one of the kids said something strange. He was maybe 8 years old, quiet, the kind of kid who speaks in a whisper even when everything's fine. He came up to me during free time. The other boys were throwing pine cones at each other, but he wasn't playing. He was just standing there, hands in his hoodie pockets, looking pale. There was a man outside our window last night, he said. I crouched down, half expecting a joke. What kind of man? He shrugged. He was tall, just standing. I think he was smelling. Smelling? Yeah, he said, like breathing on the glass. I saw the fog. I stared at him for a moment. Why didn't you tell anyone? I did. I told the other counselor. He said not to make stuff up. So I went back to sleep. I asked which cabin. He pointed to the farthest one, the one closest to the trees. That night, I sat on the porch outside that cabin until after midnight. Nothing moved. Nothing stirred. But the next morning, one of the kitchen staff found a muddy footprint just outside the cabin window. A big one. I told the camp director what the kid had said. The director was hard to surprise. One of those clipboard and coffee types who looked like he'd seen 100 summers and could handle 100 more. He listened carefully, then sighed. "All right," he said. "Let's call the sheriff, just to be safe." The sheriff showed up sometime after lunch. Tanned face, mustache, slow voice. His eyes were always slightly squinted, like he was either deep in thought or just didn't really buy what we were saying. We stood with him by the mess hall. "You really think someone's walking around out here?" he asked. "It's nearly 40 miles to the nearest town. Nothing out here but trees and mountains." I told him about the footprint, about the boy who saw a face in the window. The sheriff shrugged. "Look, as long as this camp's been running, there's never been a single report."
No disappearances. No assaults. No bodies.
He wasn't being dismissive, more like someone trying to calm things down. If only one kid saw something, it might have just been a prank. Maybe one of the older campers thought it'd be funny to scare the little ones. But after a pause, he added, "Still, don't let the kids wander off on their own, not even inside camp, especially the younger ones, and make sure the cabins are locked from the inside at night." Then he looked at me more seriously. "Stay calm, but don't ignore safety protocols." And then he left. That evening, we talked it over with the other counselors over coffee. Someone said it was probably just a prank. Some older kid trying to spook the little ones. Someone else said maybe the boy just made it up. But later, when I stepped outside and looked toward the woods, I thought I saw something, just for a second. Maybe I was tired, but I swear, it looked like someone was standing there, watching me. I woke up to screaming, not the kind you hear in games or movies. Real panicked human screaming. There were footsteps pounding in the hallway. Someone was banging on doors. I jumped out of bed just as one of the younger counselors burst into the building. She was barefoot, in pajamas, eyes full of tears. "She's gone," she cried. "The back door's broken." We ran to the cabin where the youngest girl slept. The back door, the one that led straight into the woods, was cracked open and hanging off one hinge. Splinters on the floor, and an empty bed by the window. "She was sleeping right there," the counselor whispered. "She's 5. I sprinted to the main office. Didn't even have to knock. The director was already up, already dressed, flashlight in hand. "Get the others," he said. Calm, direct. 5 minutes later, we were gathered outside the mess hall. A handful of us. Flashlights, backpacks. The girls stayed behind with the kids. One of them was already on the phone with the sheriff. But the director didn't wait. "We're not sitting around," he said. "We're going now." He took the lead. We moved fast, fanning out through the woods in a staggered line. 10 feet apart. Careful, quiet. 3 minutes in, the director stopped. Here, hanging from a branch, was a torn piece of red fabric. It was hers. Further down, a faint trail like something had been dragged. And then a single pink slipper. No one spoke. No one made jokes. We kept going. The trail curved through the trees, across a dip in the ground. And then, the director raised his hand. There, between the trees, half covered in branches, stood an old white trailer. The kind that looks like it's been abandoned for years, except the light inside was on. The door creaked when we pushed it open. It wasn't locked. Inside, it smelled like plastic, dust, and something else, something faint and rotten. There were dolls, everywhere, on the shelves, on the floor, on the tiny couch against the wall. Their eyes were glassy, unfocused, Some were missing limbs. One sat in the sink, staring up at the ceiling like it had been waiting. And then we saw her, the little girl, curled up on a thin mattress in the back corner. Her wrists and ankles were tied with what looked like shoelaces and cable ties. A strip of duct tape covered her mouth. She didn't move when we came in, just stared at us, wide-eyed, frozen. The director dropped to his knees and gently ripped the tape from her face. "You're safe," he whispered. "You're okay now." But she didn't say a word. The trailer was empty, no sign of anyone else. Two of the counselors carried the girl back to camp. The director gave them a whistle and strict instructions not to stop for anything until they reached the others. The rest of us stayed. He led us to a small rise just off the side of the trailer. Between two pines, we had a clear line of sight to the door, but we stayed hidden in the dark. "He'll come back," the director whispered. "Trust me, people like that, they don't just walk away from their nest." We waited in silence. The grass was damp. One of us kept tapping a flashlight with his fingers. Another was trembling, not from the cold. Maybe 20 minutes passed. Then we saw him. Just a shadow at first, tall, hunched, moving carefully. Over his shoulder, he carried two life-size dolls. One had white hair. The other was missing an eye. He was whispering to them. We couldn't hear the words, but his head kept tilting. First to one, then the other, like a father calming two kids after a fight. As he got closer, we saw that the dolls were wearing real children's dresses. He reached the trailer, opened the door, and gently set the dolls down on the threshold. He smiled at them, and that's when the director whispered, "Now!" He didn't see us until the last second. The director moved first, fast, without a word. We swarmed him from all sides. Someone knocked him down. Someone else struck him from behind with a branch. He hit the ground face first and groaned. "Wait," he rasped. "You don't understand." The director grabbed a metal pipe that was lying beside the trailer. "Hold on." The man gasped again. Blood was running from his mouth. And then he smiled. "She's mine now," he whispered. "You saved her, but she'll still think about me. She looked into my eyes. She'll remember." One of us kicked him in the face, hard. He lay in the dirt, blood pouring from his nose and lips. He was breathing heavily, but still conscious. The director said, "Pick him up." Two of us grabbed him by the arms and pulled him to his feet. He wobbled but didn't fall. And then he started talking. "You won't prove anything," he said. His voice was hoarse, but calm. "I didn't do anything, didn't even touch her." He smiled, teeth red with blood. "You've got the girl, alive. You've got the trailer. So what? No one's missing. No one's dead. The police will come, take a look, and let me go." None of us said a word. "You just got scared," he added. "And now you want to make me into a monster." And then he laughed, quiet, tired, but real. We walked through the forest in silence, dragging him between us. But the laughter didn't stop. Then the director stopped walking. He was staring at two tall young birch trees. After a moment, he said, "Hold him. I'll be right back." He turned and walked back toward the trailer. When he returned, he was carrying a coil of rope. "You're right, freak," he said. "But what if we never find you in this forest?" We stood in silence. No one argued. No one said, "Maybe we should wait for the police," or "We don't have the right." Everyone was looking at the director, and he was looking at two young birch trees, swaying quietly beside the trail. "Someone out there wants people like this to exist," he said at last. "Wants them to have lawyers, court dates, sentences. So we can all pretend this is just another man." "I am a man," the guy shouted. "I have rights." He thrashed, yanking at our grip, screaming. We just watched him. One of the counselors pulled out a roll of duct tape. A few seconds later, his mouth was sealed shut. He was still shaking with rage. But it didn't matter. The director walked over to the birch trees and started bending them down. We helped, pressing them to the ground, tying them off. Then came the ropes, around his ankles. He didn't fight anymore, just stared at us with wide, what eyes no one wanted to look at. "This isn't a sentence," the director said. "It's just an ending." He cut the rope holding the trees together. Both trunks snapped upright in opposite directions. Someone turned away. Someone froze. The sound was short, dull, like tearing wet canvas. Something red flew through the leaves, and no one said another word. We set fire to the trailer from the inside. The director went in first. He poured gasoline over everything, the floor, the mattress, even the dolls. One of the guys placed a kerosene lantern in the corner, like it had been left behind. Then we struck a match. First, nothing happened. Then, a rasping whoosh, like something old and greasy exhaling its last breath. We didn't watch it burn. We walked away. As for the body, the big parts we buried. The rest, the forest would take care of. Predators, raccoons, owls. In a few days, even a dog wouldn't find anything. The police arrived in the morning. We told them we'd been watching the trailer, that it was empty, that we'd found the girl in the bushes a few yards away. And then, the fire started. "Must have been an old lantern," someone said. "Plastic, dust, bad wiring." The sheriff looked at us for a long time. "You didn't see anyone go inside?" he asked. "No," said the director. "We never left it alone." The sheriff nodded. They found nothing. The girl didn't remember anything. She just asked for tea and a quiet song before bed. 3 days later, the camp was shut down. Everyone left. Some went back to college. Some just wanted to forget. Me, I still wonder, did we do the right thing? What if he was right? What if we killed him just because we could? Weeks have passed. I sleep at home now. It's supposed to be over. But last night, I woke up in the dark, and I swear, someone was standing outside my window, not moving, just watching, like before. I returned to my home after an arduous work trip that lasted for 3 full weeks. My heart ached with longing, a longing that permeated every cell of my being, an overwhelming yearning for my wife, for her laughter that brightens my days, and for the warmth of our home that my soul had grown accustomed to. I turned the key in the door lock. The metal was cold under my fingertips, which trembled slightly from sheer anticipation. I pushed the door open gently, and I was greeted in the hallway by a strange scent, not at all familiar to me, a complex mixture of something faintly earthy, like the aroma of damp soil after a light rain, and a sweet feminine perfume I didn't recognize as one of my wife's usual fragrances. My heart constricted a little, but I attributed it to her perhaps trying a new air freshener or incense. I called out my wife's name, the name I love, and her voice came from the living room, carrying a quiet tone, perhaps quieter than necessary. Moments later, she appeared, a faint smile gracing her face, a smile that couldn't quite reach the sparkle in her eyes, which had dimmed a little. I embraced her tightly, trying to draw some reassurance from her closeness, but I felt a strange coldness in her body, or perhaps it was just my own exhaustion after the weariness of the long journey and the hardship of the road. "I missed you so much," I whispered in her ear, burying my face in her hair, from which that new scent emanated. She replied in a faint voice, barely audible, "Me too. I missed you." There was a certain coolness in her voice, something I had never known from her. Then, from behind her legs, where she stood as if shielding something, an orange-colored creature emerged, with thick, elegant fur. It was a medium-sized cat, lithe in build, but what truly froze the blood in my veins and made my breath catch was the look in its eyes. They were wide, a radiant amber color, clear as if they were polished gemstones, staring at me with an unsettling steadiness, with a strange confidence, completely devoid of any familiar feline expression like gentleness or childish curiosity. I felt the power of those gazes, as if they were piercing through the layers of my skin, bypassing my bones, to reach the depths of my soul, exploring its secrets and hidden corners without permission, shamelessly. An unwarranted, cold shiver ran through me, like a light electric current. "What is this beautiful creature?" I asked, trying hard to hide the unease that was beginning to creep into my voice. My wife smiled a slightly wider smile this time, but it still carried that pale shadow. She bent down gracefully and said in a voice that seemed to carry some pride, "Oh, this is Ginger. Isn't he lovely? I found him on the doorstep about 2 weeks ago, on a stormy night. He looked so lonely and miserable, shivering from cold and hunger, so my heart wouldn't let me leave him. I took him in." She bent further and stroked his head gently. The cat raised its long, bushy tail like an orange flag and began to purr deeply, not like the ordinary purr of cats that resembles the cooing of doves, but deeper and more resonant, not without its own strangeness, as if it came from a chest much larger than a cat's. At first, I tried not to pay much attention to it. I told myself over and over that she must have felt a crushing loneliness during my long absence, and that having a pet in the house might be a comfort to her, a silent companion to fill some of the void I had left. The first few days after my return were somewhat normal, or so I tried to convince myself. We resumed our daily routine, although I noticed with a worried eye that my wife was spending significantly more time with Ginger than was usual with any pet we had previously owned. The cat followed her around the house like her shadow, never leaving her side, sitting at her feet in majestic silence as she cooked in the kitchen, its amber eyes fixed on her every move. At night, it slept at the foot of our bed, curled up like an orange ball, its eyes rarely leaving her sleeping face, as if guarding her from something. But slowly, very slowly, like the crawl of a snake, I began to notice more profound and more alarming changes in my beloved wife's behavior. The vibrant spark that used to radiate from her usual conversation had extinguished, and her resonant laughter, which used to fill the corners of the house with joy and life, had quieted. She became absent-minded much of the time, sitting before me as a body without a soul, as if she were listening intently to something no one else could hear, something echoing in distant spaces. She no longer shared meals with me at the table as we had for years, those precious moments when we would exchange stories about our day. Instead, she increasingly preferred to take her plate and retreat to the living room, with Ginger gracefully winding around her feet or settling possessively in her lap, eating small pieces of her food that she would toss to him from time to time, ignoring my bewildered and questioning glances. "Is everything all right, my love?" I asked her one evening, my heart heavy with her oppressive silence, which had become like a wall isolating her from me. I could see sadness etched on her features, but it was a strange sadness, mixed with a kind of resignation. She slowly lifted her eyes from the cat, which was licking its small pink tongue over its orange paw, and looked at me with a blank gaze for a few moments, a gaze that passed through me as if I were an invisible ghost. Then she said in a voice devoid of any expression, "Yes, everything is fine. Why do you keep asking such questions?" I answered her with a pang. "Because you seem different, sad. Did something upset you? Is it because of my long absence? Please, talk to me." She shook her head no with a slow, heavy movement and returned her gaze to Ginger, as if looking at him provided a solace she couldn't find in anything else. "No, there's nothing to worry about. I'm just a little tired these days." But I wasn't convinced by her words. There was something deeper, something that went beyond mere fatigue. That cat, Ginger, had an overwhelming presence in the house, a presence that surpassed its small size. Whenever I looked at it, I felt that piercing gaze penetrating me, as if it were reading my thoughts, analyzing my motives, and judging me with a harsh silence. Its meow was not ordinary at all. Sometimes it would emit deep, mysterious hums, and at other times strange, sharp, and broken sounds, unlike any cat meow I knew, more like a private language of its own, a language understood only by it and my wife. One night, I woke up in the dead of night to the sound of a faint whisper, a soft feminine voice seeping from the living room. I got out of bed cautiously, my heart beginning to pound with increasing anxiety. I tiptoed, following the source of the sound until I reached the partially closed living room door. Through the narrow opening, I saw my wife sitting on the sofa in the darkness, barely illuminated by the threads of moonlight filtering through the window. Ginger was nestled in her lap, like a small orange statue. She was talking to it in a low, intimate voice, with words I couldn't initially distinguish. I moved closer until my nose almost touched the wood of the door, held my breath, and focused all my senses. Finally, I managed to catch some scattered phrases from her strange conversation. "Yes, my dear, I understand you perfectly. I know what you want and what you yearn for. It will be as you wish. Don't worry, I will never let you down." She was talking to it as if she were answering questions posed by the cat, as if she were receiving orders or instructions from it. I froze in place, and I felt a cold horror creep into my heart, pumping ice into my veins. Who was she talking to? Was she delirious in her sleep while sitting up? Or was the cat? No, this was impossible, utter madness. The next day, I tried hard to broach the subject with her very cautiously, fearing I might explode at her or increase her isolation. "My love," I said as we were having breakfast, or rather, I was having breakfast while she stared blankly at her cold cup of coffee. "I heard you talking last night in the living room. Were you dreaming?" She looked at me with sudden sharpness and said in a defensive tone, "Talking? Who do you think I was talking to?" "To Ginger," I said hesitantly, trying to make my voice sound normal and non-accusatory. Her eyes narrowed slightly, and a faint, sarcastic smile played on her lips. "And what's so strange about that? Don't many people talk to their pets? Weren't you doing that yourself with our old dog, Lucky?" "Yes, of course," I replied quickly, but it seemed different, more serious, as if you were having a real conversation, not just cooing at a pet. She was silent for a few moments, fiddling with a small spoon in her cup. Then she said in a voice closer to a whisper, a voice that seemed to carry a heavy secret, "Sometimes I feel like its meow isn't just a meow. I feel like its hums carry words, as if it's whispering things to me that no one else understands." Then she shook her head quickly, violently, as if to dispel a disturbing thought that had crept into her mind, and said in a tone she tried to make casual, "Don't mind what I say. Maybe I'm just imagining things due to lack of sleep, but I could not care. How could I ignore such a disturbing admission?" The strangeness of the relationship between her and that cat worsened gradually and alarmingly, like a malignant disease spreading through the body of our relationship. She no longer cared about her appearance as she used to, she who was the epitome of elegance and grace. She neglected her household duties, which she used to take pride in perfecting and loving, and dust began to accumulate in the corners, and the houseplants she used to care for with love had started to wither. Her eyes now held a hollow, dead look, even when she spoke to me on rare occasions. And on the few times she did sit with me, perhaps in an attempt to appease me or dispel my suspicions, she would suddenly furrow her brow and turn involuntarily towards the cat, which would usually be lurking in some corner of the room, watching us silently with its piercing amber eyes. She would say in a confused voice things like, "What? Now? But I can't at this moment." Then she would abruptly fall silent and look at me with embarrassment, as if she had caught herself, or as if she had divulged a secret she shouldn't have. The strange smell in the house grew stronger day by day, that damp, earthy smell, which increasingly resembled the scent of freshly opened graves, now mixed with something sickeningly sweet, viscous, that clung to the nose and throat. I tried repeatedly to open the windows for ventilation, to dispel this suffocating miasma, but my wife would rush to close them immediately with nervous movements, claiming that Ginger felt the cold easily, and that the outside air might disturb him. It all came to a head, the final straw, one bleak evening. I had returned from work exhausted, carrying the world's worries on my shoulders. All I wished for was some peace and quiet. I entered the house to find her sitting on the floor in the living room, in a strange posture, with Ginger perched in her lap like a small king on his throne. She was feeding it pieces of raw, blood-red meat from her plate, dripping blood, and whispering incomprehensible words to it, a private language between them. She would laugh from time to time, quiet, chilling laughs, laughs that had no joy in them, but were closer to the muffled cackles of someone who had lost their mind. I could no longer bear this surreal, gripping scene. I approached her and said in a voice I tried hard to make firm and strong, despite the terror that was wringing my heart. "Enough! This is enough, woman. Look at yourself. Look at what you've become. This cat, it's affecting you very badly. It's destroying you and destroying our lives." She raised her head very slowly, as if she carried the weight of the world on her neck, and looked at me with eyes completely devoid of any human emotion, eyes like windows to an abyss. I felt in that moment that I was looking at a stranger, at a creature I didn't know, a creature that had taken over my wife's body. "What do you mean by that?" she asked in a voice as cold as ice, a voice as sharp as a razor. "I mean Ginger, that little devil," I shouted, my patience exhausted. "Ever since that damned cat entered our house, you've been changing for the worse day by day. You don't eat with me, you don't talk to me like before, you neglect yourself and you neglect our home, which used to be a paradise. It's not normal. This is not just a cat." I took a deep breath, trying to gather my courage, and said with finality, "This cat has to go. I'll take it myself to an animal shelter tomorrow morning, whether you agree or not." In that instant, as if my words were the key that unleashed a caged beast, her demeanor transformed before me horrifically. She sprang to her feet with a swift movement, and Ginger fell from her lap quietly, like a piece of silk, but its amber eyes were fixed on me with terrifying concentration, with the focus of a hunter watching its prey. My wife's eyes gleamed with a frightening, animalistic glint, and her facial features hardened into a mask of pure rage, a rage I had never seen on a human face in my life. "Don't you dare!" she screamed in a hoarse voice, a strange voice, not the gentle voice I knew and loved. "Don't you dare touch Ginger. Don't you even think about it. But he's making you sick. He's poison." I cried out in desperation, trying to reach any remnant of sanity in her head. "Can't you see that? You're not well. You need help." She suddenly lunged, with a movement I hadn't expected from her, towards the kitchen. For a moment, it crossed my mind that she might be getting a glass of water to calm down, or perhaps she would break down crying. But instead, I heard the sound of sharp metal scraping, the sound of a knife being violently pulled from the kitchen drawer. The blood froze in my veins, and I felt the ground sway beneath me. She returned holding a paring knife, its blade gleaming, waving it in my face with nervous, unsteady movements, as if she couldn't control her hand. "If you try to take him from me," she said, panting, her eyes blazing like burning coals, I swear by his pure soul that I will hurt you. I won't let you. He's all I have." The horror that engulfed me in that moment cannot be described in words. This was no longer the wife I knew and loved. This creature standing before me, trembling with rage, threatening me with a knife, was something else, something dark and terrifying, something that had possessed her. I backed away slowly, step by step, raising my hands in a clear gesture of surrender, trying not to provoke her anger further. All right, my love," I said in a trembling voice, trying to calm her down. "Calm down, please. I won't do anything. I won't touch him. Just put the knife down." But she didn't calm down. She continued to stare at me with that crazed look, the knife in her hand trembling dangerously. I realized in that moment that I was in real danger, that my life was on the line. I seized a fleeting moment of distraction in her eyes when she glanced for a second towards the cat, which was sitting perfectly still, watching the scene, and I pushed her with all my might to the side. She stumbled, losing her balance for a moment, and that was my chance. I ran as fast as I could towards the bathroom, slammed the door behind me, and locked it just in time. I heard her furious, hate-filled scream, then the heavy thud of her body against the door, trying to force it open. My heart was pounding wildly in my chest, like a trapped bird trying to break the bars of its cage, and my breath came in ragged gasps, barely able to draw air into my lungs. My hands trembled as I desperately fumbled for my phone in my pocket. I finally found it, called the police, and explained the situation in a broken, stuttering voice, barely able to string words together from sheer terror. They said they would send a patrol car immediately, and that I should stay calm and not open the door for any reason. And while I waited, leaning against the cold door, listening to her panting, angry breaths from the other side, I heard her begin to speak. She wasn't talking to me, nor was she screaming or threatening. Her voice had returned to that whispering, intimate tone I had heard her use when talking to the cat in the dead of night. "Don't worry, my love, my precious Ginger. I won't let him hurt you or take you away from me. We'll be fine, just you and me, together forever." She was talking to the cat, that orange, demonic thing that had destroyed our lives. Then, for the first time in my life, I heard another voice answer her from behind the door. It wasn't a meow, nor was it a hum. It was a thin, high-pitched voice, sharp as a knife's edge, coiling like a snake in the air. A voice utterly inhuman, whispering words in a language I didn't understand, an ancient, dark language, but it filled me with a horror beyond any description, a pure, primal terror. The cat was answering my wife. It was replying to her. I froze in place, and I felt an icy cold seep into my bones, paralyzing my limbs. This wasn't the worst of it. Oh, I wish it had been. For a few moments after that demonic dialogue between my wife and the cat, other footsteps reached my ears from behind the door. They weren't my wife's light steps, whose sound I knew so well. These were heavy, deliberate steps, very long strides, as if a giant creature, with unnaturally long legs, was walking slowly, prowling the hallway. Those steps walked alongside my wife's, and then both sets of footsteps stopped right in front of the bathroom door, where I cowered in fear. I couldn't take this nightmare anymore. I started screaming with all my might, pounding on the door with my fists, begging them to go away, to leave me alone. I don't know how much time passed while I was in this state, trapped in this cramped bathroom, listening to that demonic conversation unfolding outside, and to the thud of those heavy, terrifying footsteps pacing the hallway, approaching and retreating. Every cell in my body was screaming in terror, and every nerve in my being yearned for salvation. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of torment, I heard loud, violent knocks on the front door of the house, then the sound of police officers announcing their presence, ordering the door to be opened. In that instant, my wife's whispering voice cut off, and those long footsteps vanished abruptly, as if they had evaporated into thin air. I heard a commotion outside, the sounds of shuffling feet, then my wife's sharp scream as she resisted violently. I waited a little longer, then opened the bathroom door very cautiously, my heart still pounding violently. The hallway was completely empty, except for some disarray left by my wife's struggle. I saw police officers leading her away. She was in a state of extreme agitation, screaming incomprehensible words, and looking around with wild, unfocused eyes, as if she didn't know where she was or what was happening. She said nothing about the cat. She didn't even look in my direction. They took her and said they would transfer her to a psychiatric facility for evaluation and treatment. When things had calmed down a bit, and I had regained some of my composure, I asked one of the officers, my voice still trembling, "And the cat, Ginger, where is he? Did you find him?" The officer looked at me with obvious bewilderment and said calmly, "Cat? We didn't see any cat, sir. We've searched the entire house. There's no trace of any cat here. They didn't find him. Ginger had disappeared just as he had appeared, suddenly and without a trace, as if he had never existed, as if he were merely a figment of my sick imagination. My wife is now in a psychiatric facility. The doctors say she's suffering from an acute nervous breakdown and auditory and visual hallucinations. They blame me indirectly, saying I left her alone for too long, and that loneliness might have pushed her to the brink of madness. Maybe they're right in part. Maybe I unintentionally neglected her. But I know what I saw and what I heard. I know that this is bigger and deeper than just a nervous breakdown. I'm writing this now from our home, or what used to be our home. I live here alone, in this desolate silence. I'm desperately trying to get my life back, to piece myself together, but it seems impossible. Every night, when complete silence descends upon the house, and everything is shrouded in darkness, I wake up suddenly. I wake up to the sound of those footsteps. Long, heavy, terrifying footsteps, pacing slowly outside my bedroom door, in the dark hallway. Sometimes they stop right in front of the door, and I feel something standing there, in the darkness, watching me, waiting, breathing quietly, terrifyingly. The cat is missing, yes, that's what the police say. But I am not alone in this house. I know it's here. That thing that was walking beside my wife. That thing that answered her whispers with a demonic voice. That thing that possesses those long strides is here with me. I don't know what to do. I'm afraid to sleep because I know I'll wake up to that sound. And I'm afraid to wake up because I know it's waiting for me. I fear the silence that precedes hearing those footsteps, and I fear the darkness that hides the unimaginable. Have I gone mad too? Has my wife's illness spread to me? Or is there something, some entity, that has crept into our lives through that orange cat with the piercing amber eyes? I have no answers. All I have is this unending terror, and the echo of those long footsteps that haunt me in the dead of night, reminding me that I am not alone, and I never will be. I've drifted long enough to know that roads sometimes hum back at you. Not the engine, not the tires singing on asphalt. The road itself, like it absorbs memories, holding on to the vibrations of everyone who's passed through. I live way out, middle of nowhere, nobody for miles. Just an old off-grid camper and a rusted-out pickup slowly becoming one with the salt-blasted earth on this forgotten stretch of northern coast. Nothing around but coarse dune grass, stunted pines twisted by the wind, and the endless gray sigh of the ocean. My job, such as it is at the small fish market and general store back in Port Blossom, the nearest village, though village is generous. It's about an hour and 40 minutes walk along the cliff path and a stretch of windswept highway just to get there. A bike would help, but cash is tight out here. I washed up in Port Blossom maybe a year ago, intending to pass through, but got stuck longer than planned. Folks were wary but decent enough. Old Man Hemlock, who ran the market, let me park my derelict camper on a patch of his unused land overlooking the sea. Said the truck I used to haul it died the day I arrived. Never had the funds to fix it or move on. Didn't mind much initially. It was a quiet place, salt air, steady rhythm of the tides. But no matter how quiet a place is, sometimes strange currents bring things ashore. It started weirder than anything I could rightly describe. Boss Hemlock started stocking this new produce. Found it himself, he said. Washed up below the high tide line after a big offshore storm, down near Black Rock Cove where nobody usually goes. It wasn't fish, wasn't shellfish. Looked like some kind of sea kelp, but a deep, vibrant purple, almost phosphorescent, with thick, fleshy leaves that felt unnervingly heavy and cool, even in the sun. Sea bounty, this is, Hemlock declared, his eyes gleaming with unusual excitement. Found it down by the cove. Tastes interesting. Gonna make us famous. No tides ever brought kelp like that this far up, boss. I told him, poking a fleshy leaf. Felt cool, almost slick. And nothing grows purple like that around here. Well, this stuff says otherwise, he chuckled, holding up a piece that seemed to pulse faintly with its own inner light. Magic kelp, maybe? It wasn't magic. Not the good kind, anyway. It looked unhealthy, but he insisted on selling it cheap, calling it deep kelp. Said it was packed with nutrients. He was right about two things. It brought attention, and it turned our quiet village into something else entirely. Both for the worse. At first, the novelty brought folks in. Curious tourists passing through, people from the inland towns hearing about the strange purple sea vegetable. The market bustled like never before. Money flowed. Hemlock gave me a raise, a decent one too. For a month or two, things looked up. I started thinking maybe I could finally save enough to fix the truck. Move on. But the people who ate the deep kelp, they started changing. It began subtly, a slight bloating around the face, skin taking on a faint purplish, almost translucent sheen. They always seemed damp, like they'd just come in from the sea mist, even on clear days. Their voices grew softer, huskier, with a sibilant whisper underneath, and they craved more kelp. The initial tourist curiosity faded, replaced by an obsessive local demand. People stopped buying much else. They'd hang around the market, waiting for Hemlock to bring in a fresh haul from the cove. The friendliest old woman in town, Mrs. Gable, who used to bake pies for everyone. I saw her one afternoon furtively gathering discarded outer leaves of the kelp from the market's refuse bin, stuffing them into her pockets with trembling hands. It was sad and deeply unsettling, watching these decent people consumed by this strange new hunger. I stopped seeing much of Hemlock himself outside his cramped back office. He became reclusive. A constant damp patch spread on the floor outside his office door, smelling strongly of brine and something else, something like decay. You could hear odd, wet, gurgling sounds from inside sometimes. Late at night, when I stayed to clean up, I'd see him emerge briefly, usually bundled in heavy oilskins despite the season, grab armfuls of the deep kelp from the dwindling stock, and disappear back into his office. I don't think he went home much anymore. Eventually, deep kelp was the only thing we stocked. Hemlock found more and more down at the cove, dragging it back in heavy sacks. His own skin now having that same purple, translucent quality as the regular eaters. The town changed too. People moved slower, seemed heavier, always damp. Their conversations became whispers, focused only on the kelp. The damp patch outside Hemlock's office grew, covering the market floor in a thin, cold film of seawater that never dried, no matter how much I mopped. It seeped constantly from under his door. One afternoon, realizing we were genuinely running low on stock and knowing I had to face him, I knocked on his office door. Even the wood felt damp, saturated. Water splashed my hand as I knocked. It was unnaturally cold. "Come in," a gurgling voice answered. Pushing the door open released a small wave of frigid, briny water onto my boots. The water inside the office was ankle deep, and the source wasn't a leak in the pipes. It was Hemlock himself. Words failed me. I stood stunned, staring. He sat behind his desk, which seemed half submerged, looking monstrous. Bloated purple, his skin stretched tight and glistening wetly. Water constantly weeped from his pores, from the corners of his eyes, dribbling from his mouth as he spoke. He looked like a drowned man somehow reanimated. "What is it, son?" He gurgled, water splashing with each word. We're low on the kelp, Boss Hemlock," I stammered, inventing the first excuse that came to mind. We weren't that low yet. He lumbered to his feet, water sloshing around him. He surveyed the main store area, poking at the kelp piles with a waterlogged finger. His body seemed to ripple slightly, like a water balloon when poked. "You're right. Need more. Won't last the night." He spread his arms wide, the skin under them loose and flapping. Tiny droplets sprayed from bumps on his arms. It was high summer, warm outside, but Hemlock started pulling on layers of heavy oilskins and waterproof gear, already soaked through. He sloshed out the back door towards the path leading down to Black Rock Cove. "Keep an eye on things," he gurgled back at me. "I've seen enough horror movies. You don't follow the transformed boss into the mysterious cove." I locked up the market early, my hands shaking, and started the long walk back to my camper, the setting sun painting the sky in lurid shades of purple and orange. The next morning, stepping out of my camper, I knew something was wrong before I even saw it. The ground wasn't just damp. It was saturated, puddles everywhere, despite no rain overnight. The air was thick with an unnaturally dense, cold sea fog that hadn't been there when I went to sleep. It clung heavily, muffling sound, visibility down to maybe 20 feet. And the smell, brine and decay, overwhelming now. Starting down the path towards the highway, the ground became slick, coated in a thin layer of purple-tinged slime. As I neared the highway junction where the town turnoff should be, the fog grew even thicker. I couldn't see the road sign. I walked further, expecting to see the first houses of Port Blossom emerge from the mist. Nothing, just impenetrable gray fog and the slick, slimy ground underfoot. The highway itself seemed coated in the stuff. I turned towards where the village should be, pushing into the fog. It resisted, thick and cold, clinging like wet cobwebs. After a few yards, I stumbled over something hidden in the mist, a mailbox, tilted on its post, completely covered in pulsing, purple slime. Further on, a child's tricycle similarly encased. The entire village was gone, or rather, consumed, swallowed by the fog and whatever grew within it. There were no buildings visible, no sounds except my own ragged breathing and the faint, distant sigh of the real ocean. Everything was coated in that thick, living, purple slime that seemed to pulse faintly in the gray light. I backed away slowly, then turned and ran back up the highway, away from the silent, fog-shrouded, slime-coated place where Port Blossom used to be. The fog seemed to press at my back, reluctant to let me go, until finally I broke free into clearer air miles up the road. I didn't look back. I just kept walking south, away from the coast, away from the sea. I don't know what happened to the people, to Hemlock. I don't know what the deep kelp really was, or what ancient current brought it ashore. Maybe it was preparing the way for something else from that abyss I glimpsed in my panic. I'm just a drifter again now, looking for the next town, the next temporary job. Somewhere far inland this time, somewhere dry. But sometimes, when the air is damp, or I smell salt on the wind, I feel a phantom coldness, see a flash of purple in my peripheral vision, and I wonder how far that fog, that bloom, will eventually spread. I'm just grateful I never developed a taste for seafood.